weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum braucht er was zum Essen, bitte sehr. Es macht ihn ein Geschwätz nicht satt, das schafft kein Essen her.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil ich heim in die Arbeit einheimst komm, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Mensch ein Mensch ist, drum hat der Stiefel im Gesicht nicht gern. Er will unter sich keinen Sklaven sehen und über sich keinen Herrn.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil ich heim in die Arbeit einheimst komm, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Und weil der Prolet ein Prolet ist, drum wird ihn kein anderer befreien. Es kann die Befreiung der Arbeiter nur das Werk der Arbeiter sein.
Drum links, 2, 3, drum links, 2, 3, wo dein Platz genossen ist, weil ich heim in die Arbeit einheimst komm, weil du auch ein Arbeiter bist.
Здравствуйте, comrades. Welcome to Socialism Saturday. Socialism Saturday is our advanced class in all things dystopian, where we watch the farthest of the far left, the most dystopian of the dystopian, the real life socialists, the real life Marxists, the not the AOC Marxists, not the Bernie Sanders one. They actually think that both AOC and Bernie Sanders are like way too corporate for them, if you can believe it. And we watch their full presentations from start to finish, and we learn what they're talking about. We learn the language they're using. We learn the ideas that they're throwing out there. We learn their plan basically for evil world domination. And because of that, people who watch Socialism Saturday combined with happy hours that we do on Fridays really do know more about what is going on the woke left, the far left, whatever you want to call it, than pretty much anyone else on the internet, where there's no one else who knows as much as we do, and I'm not actually exaggerating when I say that. Well, okay, so there are exceptions to that. Of course, the actual leftists know more than we do, but in regards to people who are not actual leftists, I am absolutely convinced, and I would welcome anyone to disprove me, and I really do mean that. If you think there are communities of people out there who know more about what's going on the far left than we do, then please introduce me to them, because I would really like to talk to them. I'm not even joking about that, but I sadly think that we're it. And, which is like a bizarre thing in and of itself that I'm not exactly sure what I think about it yet. But anyway, we'll go into that another time. Tonight for Socialism Saturday, we are returning to an old favorite. We haven't watched these guys in a while. We are going back to the Democratic Socialists of America. And we're not watching their convention where they had like the progressive stack and the woke progression hierarchy, and it took them like 15 minutes just to decide whose turn it was to speak. We're not watching that, although I really want to go to that next year. I missed it this year. It was like right on my birthday, and so I wasn't paying attention. I really want to go to the Democratic Socialists of America convention next year. Just side note. But the Democratic Socialists of America, for all of their faults, and yes, this is the home of Bernie Sanders and AOC. This is the group that they associated with. For all of their faults, one of the things that the Democratic Socialists of America actually do really well is they have a metric ton of online courses. Now we're looking at the proper Democratic Socialists of America, like the national group, but there are all sorts of local chapters for the Democratic Socialists of America, like all over the country, and they're doing constant classes, constant ongoing training for their people. They also, by the way, are running in and winning local elections that you're not hearing a lot about, but they talk about them, which is how I know about them. And so this is not, again, I feel like I need to emphasize this every single Socialism Saturday. These people are not a joke. These people are actually getting themselves elected to positions of power and authority in your communities all over the country as Democratic Socialists. Because the greatest trick the Democratic Socialists ever played was convincing Americans that they aren't really socialists if you vote for it. Fish Addict heading to New Hampshire tomorrow for Pork Fest. Well, I can't wait to meet you, Fish Addict. We're going to have a great old time. Guys, as a programming note, starting on Monday, I will be out until next. Well, I don't usually stream on Sundays. So basically on Monday, I am heading up to Pork Fest, which is the annual Libertarian Festival in the woods in New Hampshire. And because there is not reliable Wi-Fi, and also because I just need a break and I'm taking a little bit of a vacation, I am not going to be following my regular streaming schedule next week. There may be streams that are late night streams that I just do off the cuff impromptu to talk about things. But they will probably be at night just because that's when the Wi-Fi tends to be best where I'm going to be, because there's just not reliable Wi-Fi. We're literally it's on a campground. We're in the middle of the woods. So I will be out all next week. We will be taking next Saturday off. I am sorry. I will be consuming some substances next Saturday in which do not make me qualified to be on the internet. And I will wish you all a happy Saturday as well, because I'm going to be off doing something else. Anyway, so I can't wait for that. It's going to be great, and I'm really looking forward to it. Yes, we do. I have the Unwoke Art Hub. I just got the rest of my merch in. Like, literally, talk about last minute, because we'll talk about this presentation in a second, but I have a whole bunch of t-shirts from my Unwoke art store that I'm selling at PorkFest, and literally the biggest box of them, which I ordered weeks ago, was sitting in customs for weeks. It was sitting, and it just barely got through last night, and it just barely got delivered today. I was starting to sweat it. I was like, if those goddamn t-shirts don't get here, I'm gonna be upset. But they did make it, and they will be at PorkFest. Anyway, back to what we are watching for tonight. So I always think it's funny to listen to leftists talk about their perception of the far right, to be honest, because most of them, just like the right, has no idea what's going on the left. Oh, look, Mike waited a whole 5 minutes to subscribe to this channel just so he could call us all fucking socialists and pieces of shit, because Mike is not smart enough to understand that we're not socialists, bro. I love it when conservatives do this. Conservatives think that they're fighting back when they do shit like this. They're like, I'm going to tell those socialists off. Wait 5 minutes to subscribe to a channel. Doesn't even pay attention to what's being said on the channel, doesn't pay any attention to any of the other content on the channel, and now I'm sure Mike feels like a big man. Oh, we got another one. Oh my god, all of the idiots are coming out of the woodworks today. I promise you guys, they think we're real socialists. They do. It's true. Well, Twisted, I'm more than happy to fix that for you. You're blocked, my friend. Goodbye. If Mike wants to show his face again and apologize for his ineptitude, we'll leave Mike unblocked for right now. Anyway, back to business. Tonight, because on this stream, we watch socialists to understand what they're talking about, to understand what they think, to understand how they see the world, to understand what their plans are, to understand what their tactics are, so that we can be way far ahead of anyone on the right in regards to this stuff. We are watching this presentation from the Democratic Socialists of America called Confronting the Threat of the Far Right. No, he was subscribed because you have to be subscribed to chat and on the channel. I just think it's funny. So this is a presentation from a couple months ago. So these guys are already gearing up. What I want you to take from this is the Democratic Socialists of America are already gearing up for the 2024 election. They're all still worked up about 2020. In fact, they start off the presentation description talking about 2020. Elizabeth says, I admit I was confused by the title of the stream, but was interested to see what you had to say. So glad I see Elizabeth did the smart thing and listened and waited to collect information. Welcome, Elizabeth. Stick around. We'll teach you all about what the socialists are talking about. So the description of this presentation is Trump lost the 2020 presidential election. Sure he did. Absolutely. But the forces he represented and the ideas he furthered, the contemporary US right, have not gone away. These forces are continuing their efforts to push the US both at in that's a typo on their part, both in the electoral and the extra parliamentary terrains towards their anti-democratic vision for the US. NPEC is, I don't know what NPEC is, but maybe we'll find out, is sponsoring this upcoming Zoom session, confronting the threats of the far right. And this was back in April, so this was just a couple of months ago. It's not that old. 3 sets of questions will be addressed in this session. 1, who is the right, both electorally and on the larger cultural front? What groups are the most active? What are the historical roots of the US right? How are these groups organized? 2, the right has several ideological strains and beliefs. Well, at least they got that part right. What are the differences? Is it possible to exploit potential divisions between libertarian, white evangelical Christian nationalists, paramilitarists, white supremacists, and other segments on the right? Well, I mean, they're actually not wrong about this one, but I suspect that they're not going to understand all of the political, different groups on the right, of which, by the way, libertarians aren't necessarily on the right, so they obviously don't know that. President AOC incoming? Oh God, don't put that into reality, Jen. Jeez. And 3, what should the broad left do to counter today's right? How should we organize and with what goals? Where does the DSA fit into the effort to create a progressive counteroffensive to the right? We will hear from and ask questions of Bill Fletcher, John Huntington, Nancy McLean. I don't know that I've heard of any of these people. These 3 presenters have engaged with the U.S. far-right analysts, organizers, and both. Oh, so they've had boots on the ground on the right, so I'm sure they know what they're talking about and won't be at all misinformed. The presentations and discussions will help DSA members in their day-to-day organizing and will provide important context for our political thinking and work through the 2023 convention and beyond. So guys, that is what we are watching on Socialism Saturday today. I really do feel like we've seen this woman before. I can't place her, but I feel like we've seen her in a presentation somewhere before. I guess we'll find out as we get into it. I suspect that this presentation, I'm going to be honest, I wanted something a little lighter today. We had a really tough month with May. I know that May has been over for 2.5 weeks now, but May was an arduous month of socialism. And I just want to say congratulations again to everyone who made it through Red May, because we watched more socialist content than really anyone should consume during the month of Red May. And I feel like I just wanted to take it down a notch just a little bit to give us something a little lighter. The Democratic Socialists of America, they don't tend to be the furthest of the far left. They're a little bit easier to understand. They're still crazy. Don't get me wrong. They're still whack jobs, but they're a little bit easier to understand. They're far left, but they're not dystopian far left. Usually, sometimes they are. It really depends. So it might be a little bit of a lighter night for us, which I think is going to be a nice little break. Reagan said, apparently Google tells me NPEC is the National Post-Secondary Education Cooperative. Oh, that's great. The National Post-Secondary Education Cooperative is sponsoring this here presentation. All right. Well, what a time to be alive. I got another super chat coming in from Jen. There it is. Jen says LBJ was a destruction was a destruction of the United States. Hey, I don't know if I agree with that right off the cuff, Jen, but I'm going to think about that one. I do appreciate the super chat. Guys, before we get into tonight's presentation, we do have a couple other orders of business. Now, if you want to support the work I'm doing, the very best way that you can do that is by heading over to my primary Substack, not to be confused with all my other Substacks, but it is my primary one, which is Carlyn, Karlyn, .substack.com. This is where I post all my best Unwoke content. Most of the articles are free. Some of them are not free. And if you want to support the work I'm doing, you can sign up for $5 a month, $50 a year. That will get you access to all of the premium articles. It will get you access to my premium Inner Circle podcast. It will get you access to the 2 Zoom calls that occur every single week in my community. And it will get you access to movie night. We do movie night every Sunday in my supporter Discord at 8 p.m. Tomorrow we are watching Minority Report, which is a classic, and I'm really looking forward to it. If you want to get access to that, what you need to do is watch your inbox tomorrow for a newsletter that looks like this. I send them out every Sunday. At the bottom of the Unwoke Roundup newsletter, if you scroll past all the news and events for the week, you're going to get to this section that says access to these perks as supporter-only perks. And if you were a paid supporter on my Substack, this little red box wouldn't be there, and you would have links to the supporter Discord, you would have links to the Zoom calls, and whatever else is going on. And if you are a member of my locals community, you can get it there. If you're a member of my Patreon community, you can get it there. If you are a member of this here YouTube channel, you can get it there as well. But I do want to encourage everyone, if you only can support me on one platform, please have it be Substack. That is where I think the most value is. That is where I'm putting all my energy moving forward. I do love and appreciate the people who support me on other platforms as well. You also get access to all the perks. So it doesn't really functionally matter, I guess, which one you join. Substack would just be my preference if you had to choose. And I am doing a little bit of a membership drive because there is a big conference that I want to do an infiltration of that's coming up in a couple months. I can't obviously say which conference it is because that would give it away on the internet. But it's, guys, here's the deal. I'm completely funded by you. Every penny I make from this Substack gets reinvested into doing more of this stuff. And I really want to infiltrate this conference, but some of it's going to cost money. And it would really, really help me out if I could get 100 new subscribers on the Substack. That would be amazing. That would allow me not only to do this conference, but there's also another conference coming up a little bit later this year that I want to get a head start on. These are some of the most important things we can do because we're actually going into their live in-person events. And we are basically observing and finding out what's going on, finding out what they're talking about, getting their collateral materials, stuff like that. And sometimes we're even able to produce video that you can consume later. I'm just saying, all right. And so if you want to support that work and also keep me in business, keeping me doing these streams, keeping me producing content almost every single day for the Substack, again, $5 a month, $50 a year, it really does help me out and I greatly appreciate it. Christina says, will my subscription automatically renew or do I have to go in and do it? That all depends on how you set it up, Christina. I think it does automatically renew unless you tell it not to, but maybe you could just double check your account and I do really appreciate that. Let's see. I feel like there was another chat I wanted to highlight. All right. So a couple more things. Let's see. Oh, let's socialism bingo, of course. Let me pop the bingo in the chat. Well, okay. So Bonnie is asking a question. You have a few different Substacks. Yes, I do. Doesn't matter if we support Carlyn or actively Unwoke. Carlyn.substack.com is the actively Unwoke Substack. So you can see right here. This is carlyn.substack.com. The name of the Substack is Actively Unwoke. The URL is carlyn.substack.com. So good news, Bonnie. Those are the same thing. This is the one I recommend you support. The one that the URL is linking to in the little ticker that's going by below. And if you want to support the other ones too, that's fine. But that's just extra. You don't have to. No one's obligated to do that. But this is the one that I would like you to support. Does subscribing to Actively Unwoke get us access to your other Substacks? No, but the thing of it is there's no premium content on any of my other Substacks. So, You don't like there's nothing to get access to. My actively unwoke Substack is the only place that I do premium content. So there's literally nothing to get access to. You guys have access to it already. You can view it for free. I have more than one Substack because I want to give you options about what you subscribe to and what you don't. And I send out a lot of email. So that gives you control over what you receive. But there's no other premium content on any of the other Substacks. So this should not be a problem. All right. Hang on. We're doing troubleshooting in the chat today, apparently, which is fine, I guess. When I tried to subscribe to another one, I was asked Okay. If you're going to subscribe to a Substack, I would like it to be this one. This is the only one with premium content. You can sign up as paid subscribers on the other Substacks, and of course I do appreciate it. I'm not going to turn it down or anything, but this is the only one with premium content. So use that information as you will. All right. So we've got the bingo card is in the chat. If you'd like to play bingo, go ahead and click generate card. I will put it in the chat one more time. And I'll drop it in the chat over on Rumble as well. And so if you want to generate your card, just click generate card. You get a free square in the middle. If you're lucky, you get solidarity twice. I only have solidarity once today. I didn't get, oh no, I don't. There it is. Haha. I thought I didn't get my equity bonus, but I did. And then we're going for lines or we're going for corners. If you get a bingo, shout out bingo in the chat. You don't win anything, but you will get a hearty round of applause. And then once we get a bingo, we're going for blackout bingo after that. This just keeps us entertained and engaged with the discussion. And I also want to let people know that I'm trying a new experiment because Twitter gave me the option to create a community on Twitter today. And so I created an Unwoke army on Twitter. You have to send in a request to join. But if you would like to be a part of it, this is like a little, like essentially you can send tweets that only people in the community can see, which I actually think is kind of nice. It will help us keep out the riffraff from the community, talk about stuff that's focused in a way that there won't be trolling or bullshit or any of that nonsense. If you want to go ahead and join the community, just follow that link and request to join. I am currently manually approving all requests because I don't want riffraff in my community. And as you guys know, I do have absolutely insane people on Twitter who are obsessed with everything I say and everything I do. So this is going to be a beautiful way where they can GTFO and not be involved and not cause any problems. And I think it's going to be a great idea. And hopefully we'll do some special community only things and stuff like that. But do just send me a request. If I don't recognize you, I might DM you or something like that, because I do want to keep this as people, quite frankly, that I trust, because I don't want any of the nonsense on Twitter to get into the community. And if it does happen to get into the community, I will just remove you. And that's going to be the way it goes. And lastly, I do want everyone to know that if you want to support my work by getting a t-shirt or anything cool like that, I do have an Unwoke Art store, which is unwokeart.com. I actually just got a bunch of these t-shirts in to sell at Porkfest next week, and they all look so cool. I got to tell you guys, the Be Bourgeois t-shirt came out great. I finally just saw it in person. It looks so cool. So you can get your Be Bourgeois t-shirt, which of course is one of the middle fingers that we give the socialists, because they really don't like the bourgeois. So we're just going to embrace it just for shits and giggles. But there's all sorts of other great stuff over in the merch store as well that you can pick up while you're there. And if you're coming to Porkfest, swing by the Unwoke Art booth. I don't have everything in stock because I don't even usually maintain an inventory, but I do have some selections, especially our Porkfest shirts. There's going to be a lot of cool ones. You can also, of course, get these on the site. We've got the psychedelic porcupine design, which came out great. This design also came out great as well. This is the live free or die, death is not the worst of evils porcupine, which I think came out great. I'm going to have a bunch of those at the Unwoke Art booth at Porkfest this week. So drop on by if you're going to be in New Hampshire, and we will sit down, we'll have a chat, and you can even get your own 3D printed porcupine with the AR-15 gun. Now, if you are not coming to Porkfest, don't order this because I'm not mailing these out. These are only for delivery at Porkfest. But they're so cool. And maybe if this is a hit at Porkfest, maybe we'll make a batch for online. We'll have to see. But these are special custom 3D printed. We're going to have a painting party on Friday to paint those up in some snazzy colors. It's going to be great. All right, guys, those are all my orders of business, except I want to show you guys the beer that I wanted to drink yesterday, but I saved it till today. I always I did, Chris, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry, Chris. Hang on. I did see it and then I did miss it. My bad. Chris says the Kaczynski Manifesto is like The True Believer by Eric Hoffer. Many writers have been calling out academic corruption. Nothing has gotten better. You know, I've heard that from a couple people, Chris, and I might have to check out that book. And I do appreciate you letting me know, and I appreciate the super chat. Thank you. All right. So yesterday, I always try to drink red beer for Socialism Saturday, and I got this beer for yesterday for happy hour, but I didn't end up drinking it, and I just wanted to show you guys how pretty this beer is. First off, it's got a great can. I love that color of pink. It's called Strawberry Pow, and it's a soda and check this out. Yes, if you're coming to Porkfest, the Lancaster police have now decided to do sobriety checks. So review what you can say to the police if they pull you over, and just memorize, am I being detained, and you'll be just fine. So here's our red beer for the day. Oh, look how pretty. It's the color of the can. Cheers, everyone. Happy Socialism Saturday. If you're drinking something fun, let us know in the chat. Cheers to all of you. All right, let's get this party started. Let's see. All right, apparently I skipped. Am I back? Is it all good? Oh God, is it working now? Who knows what's happening? Beth says, I'm getting the last laugh feeling like a foxy bourgeois sipping wine in my golden cup. The t-shirt, it did come out good, didn't it, Beth? I was so happy because I wasn't sure about how the colors were going to go, but it really did come out good. All right, guys, let's get this party started. We are watching Confronting the Threat of the Far Right, and through the eyes of the Democratic Socialists of America. Let's get this party started. Map that like button if you haven't already. Please make sure you're subscribed to the channel. We do this every Saturday at 6 p.m.
Welcome to the event Confronting the Threat of the Far Right. This is being sponsored by the National Political Education Committee in DSA. I'm a member, and my name is Amy Mepham. I'm also on the steering committee for NPEC. Thanks so much for joining us. We are really excited to get this event started. Just first wanted to thank our panelists, John Huntington, Nancy McLean, and Bill Fletcher for joining us, and they're going to be speaking in just a few moments. Would also like to thank organizers Bill Barclay, David Kotz, and Jerry Harris. So thank you so much for putting this event together. Just to give you a quick rundown of how things will go this evening, we are going to begin with presentations from each of the panelists. They will speak for 15 minutes. I'll introduce the panelists each before they speak. And then after that, we will have a Q&A session. Please note that we will be, we ask you as participants
Q&A is always the best.
List your question in the Q&A function on Zoom. We are not enabling the chat for this event. And if you could please direct your question to a specific speaker, that would be wonderful. So we have, after the speakers have concluded, we'll have a chance for a Q&A session. Also want to remind everyone that this event is being recorded. And I think that's all, so we can go ahead and get started with our first speaker. And just thanks again, everyone, for being here. Okay, I will get started with John S. Huntington. John S. Huntington is a professor of history at Houston Community College in Houston, Texas. A native of Georgetown, Texas, he spent a few years working in K-12 education before joining the college ranks. Dr. Huntington's first book, Far Right Vanguard, The Radical Roots of Modern Conservatism, examines the history and influence of right-wing radicalism in 20th century American politics and society.
He wrote a whole book about right-wing radicalism. So I'm sure he knows exactly what he's talking about.
Writing has appeared in scholarly journals such as the Western Historical Quarterly and Radical Americas, and he has also published in public-facing outlets like the Washington Post, Politico, and the Atlantic. Thank you very much. Go ahead, John.
Thanks so much. Thank you for the introduction. I'm so happy to be here speaking
He's
before
got a
the
man
Democratic
bun.
Socialists
Oh,
of
how
America,
cute.
and I truly do appreciate the invitation. So as the leadoff speaker, I'm going to kind of be walking through the origins of the modern far right. I first started reading about and researching conservatism back in 2014 when I was a grad student at the University of Houston. And back then, most history books, in my estimation, undervalued the far right as a political catalyst. Even when I started studying it, people even questioned my choice of studying the far right in general. When I was shopping my book in 2016, one editor told me that there was a quote unquote, this is his word, a fatigue around conservatism. And he wondered how the far right mattered at all in the age of Obama. But after Trump's election in 2016, of course, scholars started revisiting the history of conservatism. Rick Perlstein, a famous scholar of conservatism, wrote a retrospective noting that historians held a rough consensus about the rise of modern American conservatism. And he said that that consensus told a respectable tale. You know, this narrative argued.
Hang on, I got a super chat from Steven. If it wants to load. There it is. Hey girl, I'm back even though you yelled at me Thursday. Well, you know, Steven, I appreciate this. Listen, he said he signed up, ordered my book. Glad to hear a smile in your voice. Listen, here's the thing. I have a great appreciation for people who get told off by me and realize that I'm doing it because I want you to learn and I want you to really understand this stuff. And then you come back and you buy my book. So I appreciate it, Steven. Welcome back. Listen, if you guys can't handle me, I promise you can't handle them. That's just reality. If you can't handle my tone, you just wait until you get confronted by a leftist at a school board meeting. I'm like the fucking training ground because at least I want you to be successful. They don't want you to be successful.
That conservatives forged mainstream respectability by ostracizing the radicals in their midst. Historians had essentially created a mythology wherein conservative intellectuals, guarded their ideological.
I like to think that my yelling at you guys is more like slapping you upside the head and being like, what the hell are you doing? Stop doing that right now. You're going to lose if you keep doing that. It's like, and again, it's like someone has to tell you guys what reality is. Your influencers aren't going to do it. They made that abundantly clear. So someone has to do it.
Flock while, from intrusions of far right, crackpots, while titanic political figures like Ronald Reagan guided conservatism to political
I did
victories.
block you one spot and then you came back.
This respectable narrative laundered the history of American conservatism by casting the far right as a bit player or a troubling aberration rather than the base of the movement. The reality was that the line dividing the far right from the conservative mainstream was often blurred to the point of illegibility. Mid-century analysts Benjamin Epstein and Arnold Forster of the Anti-Defamation League observed that the two factions are difficult to separate at times, particularly when they sit at the same.
He just said that the far right and the conservatives are basically the same thing, which, I mean, this is what happens, conservatives. And this is when, like, it's stuff like this that causes me to say things that pisses conservatives off because they don't want to hear it. The fact that these people cannot distinguish between conservatives and the far right is a problem. And the reason that they cannot distinguish between conservatives and the far right is because conservatives don't denounce the bullshit that the far right does. Oftentimes, conservatives don't even want to admit that the far right exists when they obviously exist. They absolutely exist. I can show if you have never been, if you don't think that the far right exists, what I need you to do is go and spend about a week on Gab and see who the CEO of Gab is retweeting and supporting, and then just go in and look at their accounts on Gab. And you will see very, very quickly and very clearly that the far right absolutely does exist. And part of the reason that so many people get conservatives mixed up with the far right is because conservatives refuse to acknowledge their existence and they shit on anyone who says this is a problem. Yeah, James Jones, this is a great point. Sort of the same way that the far right can't distinguish between hardcore socialists and the rest of the left. That's exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah, if you don't have to go on Gab, don't go on Gab. Gab is like, there are some, I'm not saying everyone on Gab is toxic, but like if you ever want to see real racists, go on Gab. You will find them very, very, very easily. Yep, and then the Christian nationalists too. The Christian nationalists are a problem. Like the people that are like from this Shiny Happy People documentary, they're a whole other problem. Anyway.
Same rallies and applaud the same ideas. Indeed, the far-right movement grew out of the same ideological seedbed that nourished the conservative mainstream. As my book argues, the far-right formed the vanguard of the movement. And over the course of 60 years, the conspiracy theories, the nativism, the white supremacist rhetoric, and the radical libertarianism promoted by the mid-century
far radical right, libertarianism
slowly metastasized until it
consumed the right doesn't promote libertarianism
Party.
At all.
But that begs the question.
Wait.
Where did this?
You think that radical libertarianism has consumed the Republican Party? I think there would be a lot of people in the Libertarian Party who would be very surprised to hear that radical libertarianism has consumed the Republican Party. Everyone who is in the chat can laugh in libertarian now. We fucking wish that radical libertarianism would consume the Republican Party. Please.
Movement come from? Like, what are its roots? What are its origins? And there are perhaps multiple answers to that question. We could go all the way back to the early republic and consider the American founders' antipathy towards mass democracy, or their permissive attitude toward, if not outright participation in, chattel slavery. The founders created the Senate and the Supreme Court, both of which serve as modern-day hammerlocks against democratic procedure. Certainly, the legacy of the Confederacy bears,
they don't like the Supreme Court
when thinking of the history of the far right. Coming from Texas, I can attest to the power of the lost cause. Take a drive in the countryside, and you'll occasionally drive by large rural estates, with the old stars and bars and a Trump 2024 flag flapping in the breeze. But when considering the far right's influence upon modern conservatism, to me, the natural origin point is the Great Depression and Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. Roosevelt inherited the Depression from Herbert Hoover. The year was 1933. Banks were collapsing by the thousands, and millions of people were out of work. The Dust Bowl ripped through the Great Plains, pushing hundreds of thousands of migrants west in search of jobs, food, the basics of survival. A specter of desperation truly haunted the American landscape. And so Roosevelt's solution to the ravages of the Great Depression was the New Deal, a bundle of spending programs designed to lift those millions of unemployed out of poverty.
Yes, Chris.
Creating jobs through federal programs was just a piece of this, right? That was an important component, but just as important was the willingness to empower unions and also to tamp down the excesses of capital. In fact, Roosevelt took direct aim at capital in his inaugural address, asserting that these are his words, that the practices of the unscrupulous money changers had been rejected by the hearts and minds of men. Now, in the popular imagination, Roosevelt and the New Deal staved off the worst of the Depression, brought government power to bear for the benefit of the people, and laid the foundation for a popular liberal state. From a left-wing perspective, the New Deal was far from perfect. Roosevelt had to cut deals with the powerful bloc of segregationist Southern Democrats, which meant that non-whites often struggled to access the New Deal's financial largesse. Union busting continued under Roosevelt's watch. And furthermore, and most importantly, probably from a left-wing critic, Roosevelt's policies sought to defend capitalism rather than tearing it down. As Marxist historian Michael Parenti argued, Roosevelt was the guardian of capitalism who oversaw what Parenti called the reconstruction of the all-bourgeois alliance. Social democracy did not, in fact, usher in a new era of socialism. However, where the left spied a missed opportunity or a careful maintenance of the status quo, the right saw Armageddon. To the right, to the far right especially, the New Deal was a veiled attempt at communist revolution. A group called the American Liberty League, which was basically a group bankrolled by wealthy industrialists at the time, called the New Deal, these are their words, a vicious combination of fascism, socialism, and communism all together. Another far-right organization, the Jeffersonian Democrats, took a nativist angle, by deriding the New Deal as alien and foreign and inimical to America and Americanism. Southern conservatives worried the New Deal might disrupt the nation's carefully drawn color lines. One Texas rancher lamented that federal jobs programs created, and these are his words, an army of shiftless Negroes and aliens at the expense of all of us, implying that the government should work on behalf of white property owners, not the downtrodden, discriminated, or impoverished. All of this language could, conceivably come straight from a modern AM talk show or a right-wing message board in our modern era. To the far right, the fight for political and economic power was a zero-sum game. Roosevelt's New Deal threatened to diminish their privilege by uplifting exploited groups, tenant farmers, factory workers, racial minorities. This was an inversion of the existing hierarchy. And as a result, the far right congealed around the idea of dethroning and unwinding the New Deal order. This origin point, at the height of the liberal tide, produced one of the far right's guiding principles, which is an uncompromising hatred and distrust of the liberal state. Now, anti-statism itself is a pretty malleable philosophy. It explained and animated the ultra-conservative fears of federal authority, their paranoia about communist subversion, their love of states' rights and the free enterprise idea. However, the far right's anti-statism doubled as both a deeply held belief, but also as a cynical and even hypocritical political strategy. On one hand, ultra-conservatives used small government philosophies to demonize liberal opponents, depicting expansive programs as unconstitutional or even un-American. Yet, on the other hand, the far right eagerly wielded federal power to disrupt left-wing organizing and liberal governance. If liberalism was a liminal and equally dangerous stage of communism, as the far right believed, then anything was justified to stop it. Thus, state power, when gripped by a firm conservative hand, offered a salve against this existential slippery slope. So despite their anti-statist proclamations, far-right conservatives got the chance to wield federal power against liberalism through the House Un-American Activities Committee, for example. The HUAC was ostensibly created to investigate domestic fascism during the 1930s, but under Chairman Martin Dies Jr., HUAC quickly turned into a hub of anti-communist witch hunting. HUAC attacked liberalism as a communist plot and brought ultra-conservative conspiracies into the political mainstream. Dies subpoenaed union members who were involved in the 1937.
I still want to find video of the HUAC HUAC hearings after we watched the McCarthy hearing. And by the way, if you never watched the McCarthy hearing, go back and watch my stream on the McCarthy hearing. We managed to unearth like an hour and a half worth of clips from it, and it's insane. McCarthy was like the predecessor to Trump. It's like actually insane, but I'm still looking for the HUAC hearing. So if anyone has and I'm not looking for clips, I'm looking for full form videos of them. So if anyone knows how to get the clips, the video from the HUAC meetings, please tell me. Honestly, my DMs are open on Twitter. You can email me, you can do whatever, but I'm really looking for that video, and it's basically been memory hold. The McCarthy hearing video has basically been memory hold. It took me forever to find that shit.
Sit-down strikes. He listened to all manner of wild-eyed conspiracies from testimony and amassed files on people who were accused of subversion. And the media helped. The media helped amplify these conspiracies too. One New York Times headline claimed, "The Reds started the sit-down strikes," though the article itself was not based upon any sort of evidence, but instead on the theories of one of HUAC's investigators' wives. Nevertheless, HUAC and their investigations provided a blueprint for using state power to undermine liberalism and left-wing organizing, which is a strategy that would prove even more useful in the coming years during the Cold War. Just a few short years later, as the threat of global communism vexed the American mind during the 1950s and 60s, the mid-century far-right movement really reached its apex. Cold War America was a maelstrom of conspiracy theories and conspiratorial rhetoric. Conservatives of all stripes portrayed liberalism as a gateway for, if not outright, state tyranny. And the Cold War fears of communism lent legitimacy, an air of legitimacy to the far right and their kind of paranoid beliefs. Far right conspiracy theorists believed that communism had already poisoned America's institutions. Robert Welch, who is the founder of the John Birch Society, told his confidants, and this is his quote, he said, "Today the process has gone so far that not only our federal government, but some of our state governments are to a disturbing extent controlled by communist sympathizers or political captives of the communists." Senator Joseph McCarthy inherited the investigatory mantle from Dies and HUAC by continuing to stoke anti-communist hysteria through his own Senate investigations. So the ever-present red menace of the Cold War provided a broad target for far-right conservatives who were looking to undermine any sort of left-wing mobilization. The mid-century civil rights movement also provided a significant catalyst for far-right mobilization. The South always had an authoritarian streak, one that policed the carefully constructed web of segregation. As Margaret Burnham wrote, the system of Jim Crow relied upon the chronic, unpredictable violence that loomed over everyday Black life. The Black students who fought against, who fought the segregation in public schools and universities witnessed this violence firsthand. And nevertheless, civil rights activists sat in, they kneeled, they protested, and ultimately paved the way for incremental civil rights gains. But instead of viewing civil rights as salubrious social progress, far-right activists saw it instead as a Trojan horse for social upheaval, and communist subversion. In response, I'm going to give you a couple of examples here. In response to President Harry Truman's civil rights platform, Alabama Governor Frank Dixon had this to say: "This vicious civil rights program means to create a melting pot in the South, to reduce us to the status of a mongrel, inferior race, mixed in blood, our Anglo-Saxon heritage a mockery, to crush with imprisonment our leadership and thereby kill our hopes, our aspirations, our future, and the future of our children." A couple decades later, Kent Courtney, a fellow far-right activist, derided Lyndon Johnson's Civil Rights Act as socialist legislation that underscored that the United States was now being communized. Those were his words. So according to the far right, the communists and their liberal comrades in arms had pushed America to the brink of disaster, whether through civil rights legislation or economic leveling. Only a conservative counter-revolution could save the nation. Numerous far-right organizations answered this call to arms, including groups like the John Birch.
I have heard this presentation given before. And I'm going to tell you where I heard it, and it wasn't by him. I heard these exact same talking points, almost to a T, at the Socialist Reproductive Justice Conference that I went to in person, a month and a half ago? There was a woman who was giving a presentation, and she was from, and I'm not making this up, the Institute for the Study of Male Supremacy. And she gave a presentation that was more or less these exact talking points about the history and why we got here and how we got here and et cetera, and all the different groups and all the different radicalized groups. These are I promise you, these are talking points that many people that are discussing this are using in this particular movement to quote unquote teach people what the right is, that are not necessarily grounded in reality.
Society for America, the Liberty Lobby, the Christian Crusade, there were so many. These groups added tens of thousands to their membership rolls, and their publications reached the hands of hundreds of thousands during this era. The far right, as they were, saw the fight against liberalism, to them, they saw it as communism, as a civilizational crisis. Welch said that losing this battle would usher in a long and futile dark age after we have been killed, our children have been enslaved, and all that we value has been destroyed.
So Star City Fame says they're fixated on history because they intend to write the history books. So an idea I've been kicking around is I want to create a history of woke, and I want to do it in the form of just a timeline that people can interact with, of and it's kind of like, this is, I'm about to make a horrible analogy, but just bear with me. It's kind of like People's History of the United States style stuff, where it's I want to talk about the untold events. Here is when the Frankfurt School came to America and set up shop at Columbia University. Here is when Portland, Oregon integrated equity into their school district. Here is when Gabrielle Clark filed the first lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I want to create a whole timeline, of all of these milestones of both things that the far left did and things that people have done to counter it, to create some sort of timeline that explains to people, here is how we got to where we are. I don't know exactly how to do it yet, but that's an idea that I'm kicking around. I have some ideas about how to do it. It might be a book, it might be a website, it might be both, to be honest. Maybe this is the next book. We'll add this to the list of like 16 book ideas that I have to write next. But I think it would be a really good idea, like kind of like the untold history of woke sort of thing. And I don't necessarily know anyone besides me and James Lindsay that could actually do it. And I don't think that James Lindsay could do it, if I'm honest about it, because James Lindsay would focus more on the philosophy, which is important. And I don't want to discount that. But I think I might be one of the few people that can actually write this thing, which is scary in and of itself. Anyway, Mark says Carlin using the whole politics of the Solid South Democrats from 3/4 of a century ago and trying to apply it today, especially to today's Republican Party. Yep, that's what they do. A people's history of woke America, of woke in America. That's not... I might do a whole play on this. A people's history of woke. Something like that. We'll figure it out. The red thread. The red thread. Is that... Wait, is that from somewhere? What is that? It's a good title for something. I thought I already wrote the book I was meant to write. It's called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. But this might be the next book that I'm meant to write. Oh, that's Diana's West books? Okay, I'll have to check that out. Thank you, guys. All right, let's keep going.
So to combat this perceived communist revolution...
Super chat. Sorry, spoke too soon. Super chat alert. From Verdon, thank you for the super chat. I would like to point out that FDR's own Secretary of the Treasury said in 1939 that the policies they had enacted had failed at their goals and added to the debt. FDR did the same thing Hoover did on steroids. I don't think that's incorrect. Thank you for pointing that out. I do appreciate it.
Progress, the far right hoped to win elections and then wield power, not only to snuff out liberalism, but to enforce conservative beliefs. For example, during the 1960s, an organization existed called the Conservative Society of America, the initials CSA, a not so subtle nod to Southern heritage. Kent Courtney was the man running the organization. He was a conspiracy theorist who saw communism around every corner, but he was also an incredible grassroots organizer. Courtney created a nationwide patchwork of what he called local action units. Essentially, these were groups of motivated ultra-conservatives. These guys would engage in mass mailer campaigns, run for local public office.
Oh my God, not a mass mailer campaign.
The idea of a local action unit seems like just regular grassroots organizing, democracy. It's the same sort of...
You're knocking it out of the park with those mass fucking mailer campaigns. James Jones, thank you for the super chat. You need someone really good at graphic representation of data, like a classic graph of Napoleon's invasion of Russia. Like, oh God, what's his name? What's his name? I took classes with the guy who teaches graphic representation of data. What is his name? I have his whole book set. Anyway, I actually used to take classes in this, believe it or not. I learned from the guy who taught how to create the classic graph of Napoleon's invasion of Russia. So I know exactly what you're talking about. What? Tufty! Yes, Tufty! Yes, I took classes with this guy. Like, a long ass time ago. His books are beautiful. They're absolutely stunning. I still have them. Edward Tufty.
Sort of stuff that DSA and other groups do on an everyday basis. But instead of seeking greater democracy or, social justice, Courtney and his group was seeking to repeal progress and to reinforce hierarchies. Courtney viewed local elections as the soft underbelly of American politics, a place where far-right activists could gain a foothold and then pursue conspiratorial,
Yale, though, so I don't know if I want to cite
outcomes.
Him anymore.
I'll give you some examples here. Courtney urged the action units to swarm local elections and then create what he called, these are his words, a shadow government. He explained this concept in a pamphlet to CSA members, and this is what he said. The office of sheriff has a potential for juvenile education and other activities, which in many cases has not been sufficiently exploited. Just imagine the amount of anti-communist education which could be carried out by a conservative sheriff who would establish a junior sheriff's posse.
I mean, I think that actually sounds like a great idea. Why aren't more people trying to get elected to sheriff and then create a junior sheriff's posse to do anti-communist education? That's a really great idea. We should all bring back that idea. Everyone run for sheriff. There's going to be a libertarian at Porkfest that, well, the anarchist that won a seat for sheriff, the trans anarchist. Yeah, I had Edward Tufte's Envisioning Information and someone stole it. It's a beautiful book. Of course people would steal it.
Pretty ominous language and a pretty ominous strategy, considering the modern day effort by far-right groups like the Claremont Institute to weaponize local sheriffs as agents of extrajudicial authoritarianism. The far-right also targeted schools.
Oh, I thought
One of
she
Courtney's
did win.
collaborators was a
I
guy
thought she
named
did.
preacher named Billy James Hargis.
Weren't conservatives all upset because they found out that Arya was like a trans anarchist? I feel like, well, she definitely ran. Now, sadly, she's going to jail for a little while, but that's okay. She's going to be fine. For Bitcoin. That's why she's going to jail, for Bitcoin.
And he fretted about dictators, controlling schools, and warned that federal aid would lead to more and more brainwashing of children. This is the same sort of McCarthyist thinking that led Turning Point USA in our modern day to create the Professor Watch List. They actually put me on that watch list after my book came out, which is a scarlet letter that I wear with pride. Courtney hoped to counter this supposed liberal brainwashing by taking over school boards. He envisioned a school board that would use auditoriums for what he called patriotic gatherings, and that would compel the adoption of pro-American and anti-communist study courses.
I think that sounds great.
It's not hard to compare Courtney's strategies to those of modern politicians like Ron DeSantis.
Why don't you want he's about to say that, you know who else wants pro-American and anti-communist courses? Ron DeSantis. What's wrong with wanting anti-communist courses? They used to teach that communism was a bad thing in schools. I literally have the textbooks.
DeSantis' claim that that AP courses are full of woke indoctrination, or his state's Stop Woke bill, which prohibits teachers from discussing race relations in the United States.
That's not what it does.
And so ultimately, the far right sought to win democratic victories only to turn around and undermine democracy itself. We've seen this most recently with the attempt to overturn the election on January 6, 2021. The Capitol siege failed. Donald Trump is not the president, but conservatives have continued the far-right tradition of undermining democracy, whether through election audits, intense gerrymandering, or even outright voter suppression.
Wait.
Back in 2018.
How are election audits undermining democracy? If something was done fairly and correctly, then an audit is going to reveal that it was done fairly and correctly. Why would an election audit undermine democracy? What could an election audit possibly show that would undermine democracy? Why are you afraid of there being an election audit?
David Frum, the famous kind of like never Trump conservative, prophesied that he said, if conservatives become convinced that they cannot win democratically, they will not abandon conservatism. They will reject democracy. And Frum is correct. Conservatives have largely rejected the idea of democracy. But what Frum failed to note is that the right-wing authoritarianism we see today draws upon these deep roots that have permeated the entire conservative movement. Thank you.
Thank you so much for giving us that complex history and laying the groundwork for this discussion. Wonderful. Thank you. Our next speaker is Nancy McLean. Nancy K. McLean is an American historian. She is the William H. Chafe Professor of History and Public Policy at Duke University. McLean's research focuses on race, gender, labor history, and social movements in 20th century U.S. history, with particular attention to the U.S. South. She has received many awards, including in 2007, the Philip Taft Labor History Book Award of the Labor and Working Class Studies Association, the Alan Sharlin Book Award for the Best Book in Social Science History from the Social Science History Association, and the Labor History Best Book Prize from the International Association of Labor History Institutions. Her books include Democracy in Chains, Behind the Mask of Chivalry, The Making of the Second Ku Klux Klan, and Freedom is Not Enough, The Opening of the American Workplace. Thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Amy. And I would just add that the most recent book that I did that I think is more relevant here that people might have heard of is Democracy in Chains, The Deep History of the Radical Right Stealth Plan for America. So I'm really kind of building from that.
Another university professor who has written a book on the far right. So she's definitely going to know exactly what she's talking about.
Talking about this, but also in some ways updating it because it came out 5 years ago and so much has happened since. But it's great to be with you all. John, thank you for starting us off with such interesting material. And I'm also grateful to the organizers for convening this conversation because the signs grow more ominous daily about the future of this country. Authoritarianism is surging. Nearly half the states of the US are now behind a red curtain, as I think of it, whose officials are using control of state government to throttle democracy, undermine living standards, and take long-established freedoms from the people. Fascist rhetoric, tactics, and worldviews are being normalized by the mainstream media that continue to engage in both sidesism. They speak of polarization, when in fact that polarization is a one-sided lurch farther and farther to the right by one of our
They claim that both sides are getting more extreme, but it's just the right. The left is definitely not getting more extreme every single day. It's just the right. Antifa is a myth. This is a Duke University professor. Duke is not like an easy school to get into who has literally written a book on the right. Excellent. This is, guys, this is why these people are literally the writers of the history books. And this is fun. It does seem funny and we can laugh at it. But remember, the victors write the history books. These people literally write the history books. And she's saying, only the right is extreme. It's definitely not the left, only the right. I promise, pinky swear, bro.
Our major parties. Its MAGA core, Make America Great Again core, increasingly exhibits authoritarian leanings, as we see from the former MAGA president himself, but also now a slew of imitators, both at the national level and at the state level and local level, for that matter.
An imitator.
So also with the top leaders of America's coup attempt of January 6th, 2021, still unpunished, the right has been emboldened at every level. The rhetoric of today's far right echoes that of classic fascism, as does the educational agenda of Ron DeSantis and others.
My God. And these people want Ron DeSantis to win. I'm actually convinced of it. The left isn't even really talking about Trump right now. I mean, they talk about him, of course, sure, because he's good for ratings, but like they're really they want Ron DeSantis to win. I'm becoming more and more convinced that Ron DeSantis is like the establishment choice, which makes me really not want him to win at all in any way. And I don't think he's going to, but like, why are these people so focused on Ron DeSantis is the question we should be asking. But like, Ron DeSantis isn't even a boogeyman. He's not. He's a statist. I don't get it.
And in addition to more open advocacy of white supremacy, we're also now witnessing growing reliance on classic anti-Semitism. One key example, which worked for Viktor Orban in Hungary and is now rampant on the US right, that is trying to copy what Orban achieved in his country by using the rules of democracy to thoroughly undermine democracy, is the depiction of George Soros as a cosmopolitan puppet master orchestrating the left. That could be straight out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and Nazi textbooks. So too,
I mean, George Soros did just turn his entire fortune and his company over to his son, who says he's way more political than George Soros is. So again, this is not like theoretical. But I will say this though, I actually don't think that I don't think Soros is actually the number one boogeyman that people should be afraid of. I think that it is like overused to an extent, but I don't know. Well, they say that critiques of George Soros are an example of anti-Semitism because he's Jewish, and we can't ever be critical of Jewish people. If we're critical of Jewish people, we must be anti-Semites. That must be the key to all of it. Yeah.
We see the spreading reliance on bullying tactics, including violent administration that no one in the Republican Party leadership will call out. So these are dangerous times. They lack the pitched class conflict of the 1920s and the economic depression of the 1930s, but they feature new accelerants that were unknown in that interwar period. Among them, a global corporate radical right that is in increasing dialogue and communication and sharing of strategies and tactics, the capture of once establishment parties, impending climate catastrophe, and craven media moguls, think Fox News, I don't even, I have to stop saying news, think Fox Network, who prey on white fear and anxiety to spread lies and inflame divisions of all kinds for profit.
Just wait till they find out that MSNBC just beat Fox in the ratings. Who are these people going to go after now that Fox is basically a memory? After what they did to Tucker Carlson.
In fact, in my view, what the combined evidence highlights is that a particular highly ideological section of corporate capital, one that is heavily and not coincidentally based in the fossil fuel sector, is so determined to shackle democracy to achieve their ends that they are starting to experiment with explosive tactics in the way that their counterparts did.
Hang on, we got a super chat from Steven. Steven says, I would like a definition of far right. As I understand, far right is anarchy. No. Far left is totalitarian and communist, socialist, fascist. Well, I guess it depends on who you ask, Stephen. So I approach things from a very practical perspective in that I only look at things that are implemented in the real world. There are a lot of people, a lot of organizations that are absolutely legitimately far right. There are absolutely white identitarian groups. There are absolutely very anti-Semitic groups on the right. There are the Christian nationalists. The Christian nationalists are a real thing. These groups are basically really extremist. They're militant. They're authoritarian. They're toxic as all hell. The actual right refuses to acknowledge that they exist most of the time, which actually makes them more dangerous and actually just connects the right to them even more. So that would be my definition. Is far and I wouldn't put anarchist in that because anarchists actually really do mostly just want to be like real anarchists just want to be left the F alone, essentially. So that would be my definition. And then on the left, you have legitimate Marxists, legitimate socialists, legitimate communists, and that's the whole other side of the authoritarian, spectrum. So that would be how I would define it. Yeah, the real anarchists just want to be left alone. They're the only ones that just want to be left alone. Antifa are not anarchists. Antifa are communists. And then Fish Addict said, which speaker interests you the most? Vivek, Tulsi, Elder, RFK, Maj. So Tulsi dropped out, apparently, I heard earlier today. Tulsi said she had to finish her book, but she said her book deadline was moved up. They don't actually do that. That's a lie. That's not the truth. They don't do that. Publishing can't do that. Everything has to be planned way far in advance. So Tulsi's a liar. So we're not going to see Tulsi. I've seen Vivek before. I love Vivek. I'll probably go. I'm definitely interested in RFK. Larry Elder, I have no interest in at all. And I can't wait to hang out with Maj. I think Maj is great. So I don't know. Most of them interest me, I guess, but I think it's going to be a great week. Let me see. Tulsi's not coming to PorcFest. She canceled. Dennis posted about it in the group earlier today. Tulsi is lying and saying my book deadline got moved up. But I've written 2 fucking books, okay? They don't do that. That's not real. They have to plan out everything like months and months and months in advance for printing and production and all that stuff. So I don't know what the hell happened, but Tulsi is lying. She is lying. I'm going to the RFK talk just to piss people off. Dennis got me a seat. Anyway.
In Italy in the 1920s and in Germany in the 1930s. We are seeing many donors on the right, among them some of the biggest, as in the case of the Koch network, turning a blind eye to violence used to intimidate opponents and to enable their own their side's securing of control over government. And you can see that in the number of corporations that after January 6th said they would stop funding the sedition caucus in Congress and then quietly resumed that funding, and they're continuing it now. So for my entry in our conversation tonight, I'm going to open with
like if Tulsi doesn't, I'm sorry to interrupt the presentation, but if Tulsi doesn't have her book done like now, it's not coming out for at least a year. There is no universe in which Coming to Porkfest interfered with Tulsi Gabbard's book deadline. I'm sorry. That just makes no sense at all.
some deep context for comparison. As a historian who has studied the second KKK and interwar fascism, as well as the so-called mainstream conservative movement, which John just showed us, has always had a quite radical base. And most recently, the Koch network, I thought that bringing those roots to bear would be helpful in setting the stage for Bill Fletcher, who will focus more on our moment and strategy for going forward. So I want to pull back the lens for a quick look back at elements of the original fascist movements.
Lie.
But then again,
wrong,
then I'll turn to highlighting some elements of our era that are very different from the interwar years, and in fact, new in history. And I think appreciating both sides, both what is common and echoes the past, but also what is novel, is really crucial to meeting the challenge we face. Two reasons I'll share. One of my fears with using the term fascist to describe what we're seeing is that it has been used so loosely for decades now as a synonym for bad, that it's been sapped of the galvanizing power that it once had. But my biggest fear with that term is that if it goes into widespread use, I fear we're going to have the syndrome of generals who fight the last war, not the current one, and therefore lose for not having rightly understood the terrain of battle and the attacking forces we see today. So let me start with that quick look back in time. As I said, the parallels are inescapable between classic fascism and some of what we're seeing, not just from the far right on the ground and MAGA, but again, also from national and state level Republican elected officials and party apparatchiks. Whether by conscious strategy or by sick instinct, they are sampling the old toolkit, no question. But, and I think it's a big but that we need to think about, it's also very important to be aware of how different our era is from the one that yielded Mussolini and his black shirts and Hitler and his brown shirts. Then Europe had just emerged from the First World War.
Hitler was a socialist.
That catastrophic mutual devastation set off the Russian Revolution. And after the victory of the Bolsheviks, a global revolutionary workers' movement led by the Communist International swept Europe while also giving encouragement and material support to movements for self-determination across the colonized world. The World War further produced an economic crisis, particularly in the defeated Axis nations, that then gave way to a global economic collapse in the 1930s. Also, and especially in the defeated Axis nations, Germany and Italy in particular, and Germany was saddled with...
What was the name of Hitler's party? I know you guys know the answer to this. What was the name of Hitler's party? There's going to be a slight delay with it. Yep, okay. The National Socialist Party. National Socialist Party. National Socialist German Workers' Party. The National Socialist Party. Hitler was a socialist. The Nazis were socialists.
Taxing reparations, that left millions upon millions of former soldiers and military officers unemployed, angry, desperate, and habituated to violence and numb to its human impact. That made these men an ideal target audience for entrepreneurial politicians like Mussolini and Hitler, who saw in them boots for the thug armies they aimed to build, creating new fascist nations from the street up. That, needless to say, is a crude summary, but the point of it is this. Today we are not
Oh
in a
my
situation.
gosh. Jeff, big spender in the chat. Jeff has just gifted 20 memberships. I hope Autumn doesn't get one. Please let Autumn not get one. Please let Autumn not get one. Thank you, Jeff, for gifting 20 memberships. I do appreciate it. That's awesome. Autumn didn't fucking get one. Oh shit, I just pulled out my headphone. I'm sorry, Autumn, but that's hilarious. Autumn has been begging for this membership. The socialist didn't get her free stuff today, but thank you, Jeff. And congratulations to everyone who did get a gift membership.
Like that, and the distinction matters. So let me just highlight a few key differences. Today in the United States, we have no such pitched economic crisis. To be sure, we have the misery sown by decades of neoliberal austerity policies coming on the heel, or coming on top of.
Exactly. Socialists don't get memberships because they don't participate in capitalism. Exactly. James Jones says, was amused when Googling HUAC meeting videos. After a few stray clips, it started listing January 6th committee hearings. Isn't that funny, James Jones? Isn't that funny? Let me know if you find anything, though. Seriously. Thank you for the super chat.
Of generations of institutional racism, but we don't have a collapse akin.
Hang on, Jeff says, I wanted to send a super chat, but YouTube wouldn't let me. I was wondering if it makes sense that they criticize Nazi Germany when they're trying to recreate it. I mean, they genuinely do not believe that they are trying to recreate it. They don't know. These people don't think through to the logical end conclusion of their philosophy and of their strategies. They really don't think they're trying to recreate it. They think they're the good guy. Oh God, Bot found the paddle, the custom paddle. I really should have made that transparent. That's a great. We only used that emoji once. And it was when someone was in what well-deserved the spanking that he fucking got from me on that stream.
To that of the 1920s and 30s. And on the contrary, thanks to the lessons from that period, there are measures in place to avert the bottom falling out like it did then. Second, and to my mind, the crucial distinction to be aware of is that our radical right turn is being driven by from above. Again, by a section of capital that is turned against democracy.
A section
Most
of
obviously,
capital.
the network of donors Charles Koch has convened, but others too are now funding literally hundreds of organizations to impose their minority will on the majority. Just to give you a sense of that at the national.
So the Koch brothers are not allowed to fund organizations. And by the way, I'm still waiting for my Koch brother money. But the Koch brothers are not allowed to fund organizations, but George Soros is allowed to fund organizations, and we're not allowed to talk about that. Seems a little hypocritical, Nancy, if I'm being honest about it.
level, they include think tanks like Cato Institute and the Heritage Foundation. They include the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is driving the race to the bottom in the states very self-consciously and
Real
aggressively.
socialism has never
And
been
the Federalist
tried.
Society, which has captured the Supreme Court and much of the judiciary. So too, the grantees can include vast organizing enterprises like Americans for Prosperity, the Libre Initiative, which targets Latino
Americans for
voters,
Prosperity,
and Generation Opportunity, which seeks to attract and groom young foot soldiers. At the state level, the donor network.
These people are basically just listing every conservative activist organization, like every single one. They're like, if they're on the right, they must be in the far right fascist group. Like, it's just like, bro, come on. AFP did a promotion in New Hampshire where they gave away gas when it was really expensive. Yeah, that's totally fascist.
Funds over 150 organizations whose pushing of this race to the bottom is aligned through something called the State Policy Network. You can look it up online and see the affiliates in your state if you're not already aware of them. And also, the donors have many outposts now in higher education. The Charles Koch Foundation alone underwrites dozens of centers at colleges and universities and is grooming a far...
Oh, God forbid the conservatives have something going on in education. I bet they're going to mention the new school in Florida, too, with Rufo. Shauna, only Jews can fund stuff, left-wing stuff, because Himmler and reasons. Exactly right, Shauna. Exactly. Thank you for the super chat.
Farm team of grantees to spread that influence and recruit students. So all of this interrelated activity is designed to bring about radical change quietly and working within the law to change the law to rig the system and ultimately the Constitution in dirty corporations' favor. So to achieve that, they've actually managed what classic fascist movements did not. They have fielded the most watched national television network, Fox, to disinform the voters that they need and goad them to see themselves
they don't even
as
watch
victims
Fox anymore.
who must become aggressors in self-defense from their alleged attackers. By these combined pincers actions, bottomless bank accounts, hundreds of organizations effectively coordinating in a division of labor, hold on, I kind of lost my thought a little bit there. And a media ecosystem that has built up a loyal viewership larger than any outlet's following. The radical corporate right has managed, again, to capture one of our two major parties, and they have bent it to their purposes with the carrot of dark money backing and the stick of primary challenges from the right. Think about this. Mussolini and Hitler never managed that. They had to build their own parties. Also crucial and reflective of what is new in our moment, this corporate-backed right is not facing a revolutionary challenge from below of a communist and socialist-led workers movement looking to win power. What we face then is an increasingly authoritarian.
In a presentation for the Democratic Socialists of America, this Duke University professor really has the gall to say these right-wing fascists definitely aren't facing any sort of communist or socialist uprising. Can we just acknowledge the irony of that? She is literally giving a presentation for the Democratic Socialists of America when she's trying to convince people that there's definitely not a far left uprising in the country right now, and any right-winger who tells you otherwise is lying to you because they are a brainwashed fascist that's been brainwashed by Fox News.
And corporate libertarianism. That's
corporate
a very
libertarianism,
term, not appealing. I would love to see someone come up with a better version of it. I thought of maybe property supremacy with whips and spurs. I don't know, but it is
property supremacy. She calls people who believe in private property supremacists. I wonder if she would give up her house or her car or her private kitchen when the socialists come to take away all of her private property, and if she refuses, they call her a property supremacist. WTF is corporate libertarianism? That is a great question. I'm not sure she even knows the answer to that. Duke University professor right here. Emo Dante, that's what lacking self-awareness looks like. Is it ever, Emo Dante? Is it ever?
Rather distinctive, because the actual specter that our predatory capitalists face is not revolution, but reform.
I'm gonna make it. The next T-shirt I make is gonna say "Property Supremacist," private property supremacist.
And above all, for fossil fuel megalomaniacs like Koch and his right-wing allies, the driving concern is the threat of international government reform action to stop the climate catastrophe. That poses an existential threat to their profit source and standings, and they have shown us they will do just about anything to stave off that threat, from allying with Trump in the United States, to allying with Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, to pushing Brexit to undermine the European Union, and more. The highly specific—
Hang on, I got a super chat from Shauna. Property supremacy with whips and spurs just sounds like a fun Saturday night. I'm not sure how this is a warning. I agree with you. Like, you're saying something has whips and spurs and you're expecting that not to be appealing? I mean, come on. Who doesn't love a good whip?
specific nature of this core threatening force of our times is also signaled by the political economic policies their elected allies in the Republican Party pursue as compared to classic fascists. Namely, fascists were statists who used their control of government to provide benefits to their people and to pursue military expansion abroad. Look at the likes of DeSantis, Ted Cruz, and Marco Rubio, to say nothing of the Freedom Caucus in the House.
The Freedom Caucus, dun dun dun. Rottweiler, thank you for the super chat. The problem is they think they will be members of the party, when in reality, they're the ones to be first lined up against the wall after the new regime takes over, like with Stalin and Mao. That is exactly right, Rottweiler. That is exactly right. These people really think that that real socialism is going to be tried with them leading it. No. These people are but useful idiots, and they're so overeducated that they don't even realize it.
Contrast, it's like neoliberalism on steroids, plus efforts to crush civil liberties and freedoms. So then what we see is some sharp distinctions between the dynamics of classic fascism and those of the would-be authoritarian oligarchs of our time. I want to make this more concrete by outlining briefly, before I conclude, what I see as the anatomy of today's right wing in the US. As I said, in my reading of the evidence, ultra-rich donors are playing a role so core that they should be understood as the brain and the blood supply of the right's anatomy. Predatory capitalists are deliberately and strategically seeking to shackle democracy using multiple strategies and tactics. So our prime actors are not black shirts or brown shirts, if you will, but men in suits who are accustomed to operating internationally and to getting their way. But they know, and this is what I see as the key finding of Democracy in Chains, they know, and their strategies take this into account, that the public will never agree to their true agenda. So they fund others to move the agenda piece by interlocking piece with a lot of disinformation and more. Okay, second key element of that anatomy, to keep working with this metaphor, are the operations these donors fund, the muscle groups, as it were, of the project, the hundreds of groups and campus outposts I mentioned before. The third element is the media they rely on, in effect, the neurological system of this anatomy, to disinform the MAGA base and keep it loyal. By cultivating an embattled tribal identity among white Christian Americans in particular, as many researchers have shown, that media activates the reptilian brain. And that makes loyal
she just became a psychologist.
impervious to rational thinking, to the point that even where many or most of them agree with Democrats on policy matters, they will vote that fearful identity instead.
What do they agree with Democrats on? I would like one piece of data. What exactly do you believe the MAGA base agrees with Democrats on policy-wise? But they just won't vote for it because it's Democrats? Does anyone have any idea what she's talking about? I think you made that up, Nancy.
Fourth element is the limbs the strategists rely on to get where they want to go. The Republican Party, they captured and bent.
Hang on. Radical moderates making a great point. The MAGA base doesn't even agree with the Republican Party, and you think that they agree with the Democrat Party? The MAGA base doesn't even like the Republican Party. But guys, remember, she wrote a book on the right wing, and so she knows everything.
Purposes. And the fifth element is the largest numerically, the base they enlist as a battering ram. White Christian nationalists make up the core of that base, having been, of that fist rather, having been convinced that they are losing their God-given country to infidels of various stripes. But finally, and this is also important, that fist is mailed. If you remember the ancient kind of armor that medieval and other armies would use, and its outward casing comes from the least numerous, yet armed, active, and highly dangerous forces. The Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, the Boogaloo Boys, the Constitutional Sheriffs, as they call themselves. And
the Boogaloo Boys are leftists. The Boogaloo Boys are not on the right. They are leftists. You people are morons. Do you even bother to research any of the groups that you're talking about? The Boogaloo Boys are not on the right. My God.
And the like. So what is this combined anatomy now doing? Systematically disrupting and seeking to remake institutions previously beyond their control that might prevent their victory. I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to dig into any of the particulars, but I will just flag some. And if people want to raise questions in the discussion, they can. Obviously, the Republican Party, which has been thoroughly remade in its congressional delegation, both in the House and Senate since 2010.
Not thoroughly.
Election administration. The intimidation, continuing harassment from Trump's big lie has driven so many people out of election administration from both parties. And that could be the greatest toll of January 6th.
That's a shame.
Public health, as we saw with the pandemic, has been subject to unbelievable attacks and intimidation, so that many people are leaving that field and nursing. Public education. Again, libertarians cannot abide the idea of public education.
Goddamn
so what
right.
we're seeing now from the likes of DeSantis is building on previous efforts to privatize.
DeSantis is not a libertarian in any way, shape, or form. Is Ron DeSantis a libertarian? Are you insane? If DeSantis was actually a libertarian, he wouldn't just be doing the Stop Woke Act. He wouldn't just be doing the Don't Say Gay bill. He would be arguing to defund all public schools and abolish the Department of Education. That is the libertarian position, you absolute morons.
Education, but weaponizing racism and hostility to trans people and homophobia to do that. Finally, there's one more institution that the combined forces of the radical right are making a play to disrupt and repurpose that we need to be very aware of: the military. Again, in the interest of time, and I want to get to Bill, I'm not going to say as much about that, except to say the white power groups, the Christian nationalists, and the Koch network have been focusing on the military in ways that we can talk about.
Yes, they want to stop wars.
There are people within the military saying
they want to stop foreign wars.
And there are no prosecutions of January 6th. It's quite possible that the military could split in 2024 with a Trumpian outsider.
DeSantis is not a constitutionalist. DeSantis doesn't even believe in free speech. DeSantis used the state power to punish a private entity for speech critical of the government. Then he went around and bragged about it at fundraising meetings. DeSantis is not a constitutionalist. DeSantis is a statist. He is an establishment statist who had really good talking points on COVID during all that and had a couple good media appearances where he told the media to F off. But DeSantis is a statist, establishment authoritarian.
Being able to command significant forces within the military and cause a civil war-like situation. Okay, so what does all of this tell us? That getting the diagnosis and treatment plan right is literally going to be, in many cases,
Luke, if you can't find a place to camp, I have an RV site and I think there's going to be extra room. And so if you need a place to camp, then I can probably help you out. But you might want to get a couple other options too, because I'm not sure exactly how much room there's going to be, because I know there's like trees and stuff. But if like you really need it in a pinch, I can help you out. Just on the Unwoke art site.
a matter of life and death. It is no longer deniable that we face a growing authoritarian threat in America, but this threat is distinctive in many ways from things that we have seen before. But here's something else to keep in mind, and I'll just say this in wrapping up before handing it over to my friend Bill. We also have some resources that anti-fascists of the 1930s lacked, and that can enable us to defeat this threat as they could not. And I think it's very important to be aware of those, of the kind of tailwinds that we have on our side. Above all, we have a vast, broad, and now intersectional left, and I use that term, inclusively and broadly, but that is now rowing together like never before in my lifetime, and it's seeing this authoritarian threat. It has also shown the ability to set the.
Do you suspect this is another case of socialist code speak, or do you think they are just stupid? I think she's just stupid and has not actually looked into the communities that she claims she's looked into. Listening to both of them again, it sounds like code speak to me. I don't think this is code speak on this one. Normally, I would agree with you, but I don't think in this one. I think that she actually just is this ignorant about the things that she claims to be an expert in. Remember, though, these are the democratic socialists. So if we've got the communists and the Marxists and the professed socialists up here, democratic socialists are just like one notch below that. It's kind of like socialism light. They're still ahead of the progressives, but like they're underneath the real evil. And so when you get into the democratic socialists, you will have true believers. And you will have actual socialists and Marxists and all those things. I think that she is a sheltered, like ivory tower university professor who has no grounding in the real world at all, who only knows what she hears about on MSNBC or reads in books written by her lefty friends or reads on Huffington Post. That's what I think we're dealing with here. Because she's not speaking in code is the thing. She's not using their normal code. She's an academic. Yeah, exactly.
Agenda for a Democratic president and Congress in a manner not seen for half a century, even though Biden is now seeming to walk away from a lot of that. Initially it was a surprisingly progressive agenda. And I think this is in part because we have brilliant Black, Latino, Asian American, female, and queer leaders who understand well the need for a fusion politics to get us through. And they have proved that they can win over
The
white
queer
men,
leaders will save
straights,
us
and
all.
establishment figures with fusion messaging and determined grassroots organizing. We also have a generation coming up that is the most diverse, inclusive, and progressive in our history. And finally, precisely because we don't face the cataclysmic economic and social conditions that produce the original fascism, we have a bit of breathing room, not much, but some, to hone our strategy and make the alliances needed over the next few years. And that means we can use this current crisis to renew democracy, to meet the fierce challenges of our time, and to create a better world before it is too late. As the Gen Z activists remind us, there is no planet B. Thank you. Take it away, Fletch.
Thank you so much, Nancy. Yes, I will do just a brief introduction of Bill Fletcher before I hand you the mic. But thank you so much for that, providing that historical and international context, and also for the locating this idea of a new kind of fascism, and locating that within global corporate capital. Thank you so much. Now, our final speaker tonight is Bill Fletcher. Over the years, Bill Fletcher has been active in workplace and community struggles as well as electoral campaigns. He has worked for several labor unions in addition to serving as a senior staff person in the national AFL-CIO. Fletcher is the former president of Trans-Africa Forum, a senior scholar with the Institute for Policy Studies, and in the leadership of several other projects. Fletcher is the co-author with Peter Agard of The Indispensable Ally, Black Workers and the Formation of the Congress of Industrial Organizations, 1934 to 1941, the co-author with Dr. Fernando Gapassin of Solidarity Divided, The Crisis in Organized Labor and a New Path Towards Social Justice, and the author of They're Bankrupting Us and 20 Other Myths About Unions. Fletcher is a syndicated columnist and a regular media commentator on television, radio, and the web. So please take it away, Bill Fletcher. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Amy. And good evening to everyone. And my thanks to my fellow panelists. So let's consider what we've just heard. 2 points.
Now, this guy is a socialist. I'm telling you right now. I want to test the chat. Does anyone agree with me? This guy has socialist written like all over him. First of all, he's not in any sort of like fancy schmancy like academic looking place. Everything's very plain, right? That's key socialist. Yeah, we know. They have a look about them. The real socialists have a look. They have a vibe.
Immediately come to mind. In order to really summarize the objective of the far right, it's very simple: to overthrow the 20th century. And that is what unites the far right. There are many divisions among them that are significant, but overarching, that's what it is. And I refer to it, along with other friends, as a new confederacy. The second thing
here we go.
Also draws from something that Nancy was raising. And in listening to her, I was reminded of a story that Lukács tells in his short but very interesting book, Lenin. And he tells about a meeting that took place in 1920 after the Kapp Putsch in Germany. And that was an attempted military coup. And the German communists went to Moscow to meet with Lenin and to talk about what happened. And they gave this sort of exhaustive analysis. And at the end, they said, and the next time that the German right tries this, we'll be ready. And Lenin, after having not said anything, looks at them and says, what makes you think that the German right will repeat the same approach that they took in the Kapp Putsch? And I think that that's one of the things that's important about what has been raised already, that we should not be looking to the 20s and 30s and early 40s. We should look there to get some idea of elements of the far right, and particularly 20th century fascism. But we have to understand what is new, what's different. And I think that Jonathan and Nancy raised that, so I want to applaud that. So a few basic points in terms of beginning to think about how we need to mount a strategic response. One is to emphasize that the right is not a monolithic force, never has been.
Correct.
There are multiple tendencies within the right. Some of them despise one another.
Correct.
Just like people like Richard Viguerie despised Richard Nixon in the late 1960s, but they were able to figure out ways of collaborating. And so you have that. A second thing is that the Republican Party has become a party for dictatorship. it's not just a consolidated right-wing party. It's a party that has come to accept the idea of dictatorship as a legitimate direction. And what they would probably think of as, I forgot there was a name that Pinochet used for Chile, the iron democracy, I think it was. But I think that their vision of the future is along those lines, an authoritarian democracy, meaning a system where you have the pretense of democracy in elections, but there's no reality to them. A second thing that many people on the left do not discuss when it comes to the right is that both in fascism of the 20s and 30s, but also now, two things really are interesting. One is that fascism was not the monolithic unity of the capitalist class against the working class and other popular classes. It was just as much, in some cases, an intra-capitalist fight. And this becomes very, very important in terms of the way we look at the current situation, that there is an intra-capitalist fight that's underway. And they've personified, the right has personified the enemy in the form of people like George Soros, which works out in terms of anti-Semitism, obviously, but they're trying to indicate that there is this distinction within the capitalist class. And so this fight from the far right is both against elements within the capitalist class, as well as against popular classes. It's a fight that within the capitalist class that really is aiming to eliminate constitutional democracy, democratic capitalism, and advance the interests, particularly of fossil segments of capital, real estate, and some elements of finance. Now, with that in mind, what are some of the conclusions that we should think about in terms of going forward? Because one of the big dangers in these discussions is the danger that you see in some responses to the climate crisis, which is hopelessness, that there's nothing that we can do. Might as well just pull out the herb, get really high, and just try to coast, because there's nothing we can do. And that is what our opponents would like us to believe. But there actually are ways of stopping this. There's nothing particularly inevitable about any victory on the part of the right. Strategically, we need to be thinking at the level of what I've been calling B4, a broad front opposing the right. That is, we need to understand that this is not a fight that is only the working class against capitalists. It's not a fight only of the left against the far right. It's a fight that has to entertain an engagement with all those who are prepared to oppose the far right. Now, I can already hear it, that some people are saying, oh my God, class collaboration, Fletcher, and people arguing that we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for neoliberalism. Well, maybe we wouldn't, who knows?
What he's saying is, he is actually talking sense. He is a smart socialist. He's saying, listen, guys, in order to defeat the right, everyone has to play ball. Everyone has to act like we're on the same team, even if we disagree. And he's preemptively saying, now, I don't want to hear any nonsense from you people who say we can't work with the bourgeois, okay? He's actually being strategic. This guy is dangerous, okay? These are the people we need to watch out for. It's the people who are like, everyone needs to work together. Come on, let's all get along.
But the point is, we are here. So the question then is, who is it that has an interest, an objective interest in opposing the far right? Those are the forces that we have to figure out ways of aligning with, at least tactically, and in other cases, strategically. Now, this will be very difficult for much of the left, because we're used to, Freud called it the narcissism of small differences.
Oh my God, these people are obsessed with Freud.
And I stumbled across that in Kim Stanley Robinson's brilliant book, The Ministry of the Future. But it turns out that it is a concept that Freud elaborated, which really does describe much of the left. that we are prepared to fight it out to the knife over minor differences and can't figure out how to build upon those areas of strong unity that we have. In order to defeat the right, we on the left are going to have to identify what are the issues around which we must unite in order to function in a very cooperative, and I don't mean that moralistically, but in a cooperative way. And the second thing is, how do we identify people that may not be within the left at all? There may even be some elements of the right that nevertheless are in open opposition to the far right. Now, this is not unprecedented. During World War II, for example, in some of the very successful work led by the left against fascists, like in Yugoslavia and some other places, there was a willingness to unite with forces that were not particularly radical, but were in opposition to fascists. The real trick is to understand that we have these immediate interests and they may not last very long. So you always have to be operating with your third eye open. But while the basis exists in order to collaborate against our principal enemy, you go forth and you do that. So we need the notion of a broad front opposing the right. In thinking about that, I would argue we draw from lessons that were elaborated by the architects of the new right in the late 60s and early 70s.
Who were they?
And one of the things that they brilliantly did was to operate on multiple levels, the political and legislative, the areas of litigation and area of mass movements. And one thing that they did far superior to us is that they did not make preconditions for people participating in one or another area, or when it came to mass movements, in participating in different mass movements that might have been right wing, but there was no bar that people had to jump over other than agreement around those issues. Now, we on the left, we offer a different approach to these things. We are constantly trying to raise the bar to make it more and more difficult for people to enter into struggle and to engage our enemies, more and more difficult. We'll always come up with greater differences in order to keep people out and to demonstrate how pure we are. And we'll remember that when we're marching off to the camps, how pure we are. And so
well, at least he acknowledges on some level he's the one going to the camps. Now, I don't think he's processed yet that it's going to be the left, the actual the actual socialists who put him in the camps. But at least he's acknowledging on some level that's where he's going, I guess. I also think it's funny that he thinks the right doesn't have purity tests and he thinks the right doesn't gatekeep in their movement. Yo, the right will flat out tell people, don't vote for us. We don't want your vote if you like the gays.
One of the things we have to think about in a very different way then is building this broad front, understanding that there will be strategic allies and tactical allies that will be operating on multiple levels. So, for instance, in Florida, one of the things that I have wondered
so
about
terrified of Ron DeSantis
is we're not going to defeat DeSantis on the basis of weekend rallies. Demonstrations are going to be very important. But let's think differently. In order to defeat an opponent, one of the things you do is you aim to defeat their strategy. So if DeSantis pushed through this legislation around so-called critical race theory, in essence saying that you cannot teach students anything that's going to make them feel guilty or make them feel unsettled. Why don't we, progressives, launch a class action led particularly by Black parents in Florida that challenges US history as something that constantly makes us feel bad, that constantly makes us feel less than we are, that constantly ignores us from history. Let's use DeSantis's own language and law and kick his ass. See, we've got to think differently about how to approach this. Now, there will be people that would be interested probably in engaging that who are litigators. They may not be mass movement people. So what? Engage them, right? Bring them in. Make them feel part of this movement. They have to be part of the movement. That was one of the beauties of the civil rights phase of the Black freedom movement, where there were multiple means for people to engage, whether they were lawyers, whether they were street fighters, whatever they were. We've got to be doing the same thing. Or people that may not want to be involved in electoral politics. There's plenty of stuff to do. For example, the next time these fascists show up at school committee meetings, instead of us firing off tweets and text messages, complaining about how horrible the situation is, why don't we show up in triple the numbers? Why don't we just show up? I mean, there was this interesting story you may have seen, and I'm taking a risk in telling this story, but it was a couple of years ago in Texas that some fascist group decided that they were going to do an armed protest in front of a mosque. And unfortunately for them, there were armed African Americans that showed up at the same rally. And all of a sudden, these armed fascists decided that they had something else to do, maybe wash their car, clean the house, something, and they left. You see, one of the things, these are bullies. And what we have to do is we have to respond to the bullies. We have to utilize self-defense, and I'm not going to elaborate any more on that. But we also have to,
of course not. Why would you?
be there in numbers. And so when abortion clinics are being attacked, we have to be there. When there is that threat to women, we've got to be there. When there are school committee efforts, we've got to be there. And so it's that organizing that mass base and getting people engaged, getting our union members involved, getting people in tenants groups, getting other folks involved. And if you know, for some of the senior elements, I think about my mother, who's 95 years old, who is, you know, constantly at it, very progressive and saying that she wished she could do more. I said, Mom, just write a check. Just write a check. And don't feel bad about that, because the movement needs the resources. You see, we've got to be thinking in a very different way. In fact, we've got to be thinking like winners instead of as victims. I'm sick of victims. I didn't sign up with this to be a victim. I didn't sign up with this to be a loser. I signed up to win. We have to defeat the other side. Now,
listen, I'm going to say this again. This guy might have some crazy ideas, but he is also the type of person that is actually dangerous and actually gets shit done. So I don't want to underestimate people like this. These are the ones we should be worried about. You shouldn't be worried about the crazy people that are screaming at the protests, that are doing all this crazy stuff on TikTok. Those are not the people you're worried about. You need to be worried about people like this, because he gets it. And he's smart, and he knows what he's doing. Oh, he's from Boston? Oh, that's great. Not that one, that one. That's great. Yeah, there are a lot of socialists in Boston, actually. Never let them convince you guys that the TikTok people are the people that you should be afraid of. The TikTok people just want to be famous on TikTok. That's it. They're posting cringe stuff to get famous on TikTok, that it will go viral on TikTok for being cringe. A lot of it's not even real. Those are not the people you need to worry about. These are the ones you need to worry about.
Another piece, and then I'm going to shut up. The defense of the status quo cannot be our basis of unity. The status quo is certainly better than fascism, but that's not what's going to mobilize people. That's the problem. That when we think about defeating the right, it's not simply putting up a picture of Donald Trump or DeSantis and throwing darts at them, right? It's not just saying, oh my God, if you don't vote for us, you're going to get this, even though that scares the bejeebies out of me, and I'm ready to vote. But the point is, that's not enough. We've got to be thinking in a different way, and that is towards offering an alternative. And this is where the role of the left becomes very important. Not some pie in the sky alternative. I mean, a fight for governing power here and now. What does it look like to take over cities and counties and states? How do we break out of state preemption, which is what's destroying the city of Jackson, Mississippi, had been used to destroy Gary, Indiana, used to weaken and destroy Detroit. How do we do that? Well, we have to have a different kind of strategy. And we've got to be thinking at a different level. We've got to be thinking about an alternative set of economics and politics. And that becomes the call, the call that we articulate in the fight. So it's not just a fight of resistance. It is that. But it's also a fight to advance a different vision. Now, as socialists, ultimately, we want something that transcends capitalism. But here's the dilemma, and I see this in the environmental movement as well. If all we say is that the solution to the environmental crisis is socialism, that presents some major problems. Like, well, how do we get from where we are now, where the planet is dying, to there? And how do we help people understand that democratic capitalism can be reformed up to only a certain point? And that past that point, something fundamentally different is necessary. It's by engaging people in real world struggles, in a fight to transform their lives. That's what we need to do. I would argue DSA needs to be an advocate for B4. It needs to join with others and say, that's what we need. We need B4. We're going to work with others on the left. We're not going to be just looking at our navel. We're not just going to be priding ourselves on our numbers. We're going to be embracing other forces on the left, because that will be the only way that we'll be able to build a significant enough core in order to build a broad enough front. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't know if you can all see the reactions on Zoom. There are hearts and clapping hands, and so thank you so much for that. Wonderful. I can't wait to get into some discussion now. We've got some questions that have come up. So
excellent Q&A.
Good
long Q&A.
We've asked people to address them for particular presenters. So I'm going to start with. So we might be going back and then moving forward a little bit. So I'm going to start with our first question that we have here. This is for John Huntington. This is from Alexander Gorlick. Can John Huntington address if he thinks that, or if certain strains of Protestant Christianity, particularly figures like Robert Schuller from Los Angeles in the 1930s, contributed to this history? Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fundamentalist movement, the evangelical movements of the 30s, 40s, 50s, all contributed, to this. There's a lot of great books on this. One of my favorites is Darren Dochuk's book From Bible Belt to Sun Belt, which details kind of how conservative fundamentalists brought their Christianity from the deep South over to California and kind of built these very right-wing movements. And I think it's not just Protestants either. Look at Catholic priests like Father Coughlin, who had a really right-wing radio show, was an anti-Semite in the 1930s. And all of these guys very much contribute to the the apocalyptic kind of paranoia that represents the far right. I mean, there was the antagonism towards ecumenicalism, the idea that why focus on earthly goods when when heaven awaits, sort of thing. And so absolutely, I think that that the Protestant Christianity, particularly the fundamentalist and evangelical groups that existed during the 50s and 60s and even earlier play a key role in this. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I'm going to let everyone know too that I'm going to take these. I might be taking questions a little bit out of order to kind of maybe group them or theme them if I can. But I want to go next to this question from Allison Chang, who asks, would Professor McLean speak more about, or we're just keeping it some Christianity questions here. Could Professor McLean speak more about the role of Christian nationalism in the far right? It seems this group is very successful in using the media to normalize extremism, largely by claiming with no pushback that their anti-democratic goals and overt bigotry are innocent expressions of quote.
They think that the right is successful in using the media to advance their goals. These people have absolutely no self-awareness at all.
Sincere belief.
Yeah, the Christian nationalists are really, and when we say that, I think we're really
Who are they?
essentially
Do you even know?
talking about white evangelical, white evangelicals, and to some extent conservative Catholics, but the white evangelical presence has been really strong and doesn't have any countervailing tendencies like, you know,
Now,
the Catholics have a social.
To be really clear, the Christian nationalists do exist. They absolutely do exist. Anyone who is going to run around saying America is a Christian country, no, it's not. No, it's not. You can't name one Christian nationalist. Really? Really? Give it a try. Does anyone want to name at least one Christian nationalist? Because I can name several off the top of my head. This is a problem, guys. Anytime you lie overtly, and Gray One, you've been watching my content long enough to know exactly who this is. Anytime you guys lie overtly and be like, Christian nationalism doesn't exist. Yes, Matt Walsh would be a Christian nationalist. Absolutely. William Wolfe, Stephen Wolfe, Charlie Kirk, Nick Fuentes. I don't know who Victor Hansen is, but Kurt, you're pretty dead on about a lot of things, and so I'll trust you there. Michael Knowles is a Christian nationalist. Nick Fuentes, Mike Pence, absolutely. Autumn is occasionally right as well. Mike Pence is absolutely a Christian nationalist. Absolutely. John Doyle is a Christian nationalist. Absolutely. These people want a Christian nation. They want our entire government to be based on the Bible. They want to legislate their Christian values. That's who we're talking about. And Mike Pence is absolutely dangerous. Mike Pence should, and well, he's not, he is and he isn't, because Mike Pence, if he got into power, would absolutely be dangerous. Mike Pence is never getting into power again. The MAGA base hates Mike Pence with the fury of 1,000 suns. Like, of all the people in this clown car Republican primary, Mike Pence is like, the fact that people are even spending money on Mike Pence to run for president is like a mind-bogglingly like awful waste of perfectly good money. Like, these people might as well just like come to PorkFest and throw all their money in the bonfire, because that's basically what they're doing in investing in running Mike Pence for president. So stupid. Anyway.
Justice tradition and, you know, some support for unions. And so I think, you know, could maybe somehow be a weak link. Certainly Pope Francis is encouraging in that regard. But, you know, you can take this story way back, right, to like the Scopes trial in the early 20th century. So there was a whole reaction among white evangelical conservatives kind of against modernity, against a lot of things that were happening in education in particular. And they started building up their own counter institutions and their own kind of closed culture for a very long time that then became public in the 1970s. But something that we've seen since the 1970s is the fusion of the top entrepreneurial religious leaders of that constituency with the billionaire right. You know, and there's other people who have written about this. Ann Nelson has a very good book called The Shadow Network, about the Council for National Policy. And she shows very concretely how they come together and reinforce one another, and also operate through the likes of Salem Broadcasting, which now reaches 1 in 5 radio listeners. You know, they're kind of omnipresent out there. So it's really, really a significant issue. And they're the key, most reliable constituency for the Republican Party now, and the most reliable Fox viewers, and the strongest supporters of MAGA. So it's going to be, I think, a very hard nut to crack. And I'm not even sure that that's where efforts should start, although it would be wonderful to find ways to open things up a little bit. But I think, you know, one of the things that they've done tremendously effectively, going back to Bill Fletcher's point about litigation is to ally on the question of religious liberty. And the only liberty in question is really the liberty to dominate people, as in school prayer, or the liberty to discriminate against people. But that is happening in a very big way.
Republicans really do need to give up this school prayer bullshit. Every single time, and this is part of what got Moms for Liberty in trouble. I mean, like many things have gotten Moms for Liberty in trouble, but the fact that they were like, we're not banning books, we just don't want these books in the schools anymore, and then, oh wait, there's some room on the shelf, we might as well put a Bible there. It's like the prayer in schools, the Bibles in schools, it is such a ridiculous fight that will always end up with giving the left an advantage over the right. It's also not constitutional, by the way. I don't know why right-wingers can't just like settle for teaching their kids their religious values in their own home. Like, I have no problem with you guys being Christian, but I'm not, and I don't want other people being forced to learn Christianity. Like, I'm going to make a deal with all the Christians out there, I promise. I will never force you to learn about my spiritual belief system. I will never try to legislate my spiritual belief system. You don't have to engage with it at all. No one is going to ever force you to do ayahuasca. No one's ever going to force you to meditate. No one's ever going to force you to participate in a discussion about spirituality. I promise you, it's going to be okay. You don't have to do it. In return, quite literally, all I want is for you to not force your Bible on me. I have read your Bible more times than most of you. I have like 4 different versions of your Bible sitting on my bookshelf right over here. I understand what it says. I have engaged with the content. I don't believe it's the way, the truth, and the light, okay? You're allowed to. I don't. And so all I am asking is that you don't force your books on me, and I won't force my beliefs on you. I don't know why this is so hard. But every single time the Christian right does this, it ends up with these people using it against everyone who is against their leftist bullshit. Like, at some point, Christians need to say, you know what? We need to put our goals of forcing everyone to be Christian on the shelf for a little while, because there are actual goddamn problems. And every single time we say, can we put the prayer in school? Can we put the Bible in school now? Every single time Christians do that, they give the Marxists a leg up to take over and to win. Every single goddamn time. So can we all just agree that this is a losing strategy? That you can do whatever you want in your own home. You can teach your spawn whatever myths you want to teach them. I don't really care. But can we just stop making it a part of public life? I don't think I'm asking too much. I really don't. Kyle, thank you for the super chat. As a right-leaning Catholic, I don't want to force people into religion. Yeah, I think that this should be the attitude. Like, whatever you want to practice, fine, man, go to town. I will defend your right to do it, but not in public school. To be fair, I don't think anything should be taught in public school, because I think public school should be abolished. But as long as we have it, I would prefer it not to teach the Bible in English class, or in whatever social studies, or in whatever other class. And I don't want the Bible on the bookshelf in the library either. Can't we just agree on this one point? I don't think it's too much. I don't. I'm sorry.
As the Koch network and others, who originate on the Christian right, fund groups like the Alliance Defending Freedom, which actually operates transnationally to stir up homophobia and transphobia in order to build up base voters for reactionary populism. I think it's a really important question, and really important for people to know about, and also to know the history. There's a great book by Anthea Butler, a theologian, about about the 19th century roots of this white evangelical Christian nationalism in the slaveholders' denominations of various evangelical denominations. So it's a huge issue that needs to be solved. And I'm glad that I think it was Allison, was it? Or no, it was, who was it that raised it? Where'd she go? Anyway, thank you.
It was Allison Chang, yes.
Oh, it was Allison. Okay, good.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm gonna try to divide the questions up between some of our panelists. So I'm gonna go to Bill next. This is from Aidan Bissell-Siders. Hi, Bill. I strongly agree with your argument that socialists must work with, quote, all those prepared to oppose the far right. Which groups do you think are doing the best work and most deserve socialist cooperation in this progressive front?
That's an interesting question on multiple levels. So I think that there are some forces in DSA that get it, and some that are also trapped in purism that don't get it. There's groups like Liberation Road and Left Roots among the socialist left. There's then you have forces in the broader progressive social movements, some of whom I think are getting it. And I'm thinking in the trade union movement, you have unions like National Nurses United, American Postal Workers Union, and some others that SEIU that get it, and the importance of this. There are groups like the Working Families Party. There are statewide organizations like New Virginia Majority, Florida Rising. The problem is that we're less than the sum of our parts. And there's very few people that are putting out the call for a political and organizational reconfiguration. Bill Gallegos from Los Angeles and I wrote a piece in The Nation a few months ago that talked about something called mountain stronghold mentality. And I just want to reiterate this point. The term comes from something that Mao Zedong used during the Chinese Revolution to describe a phenomena where during the guerrilla wars, you'd have bases that were on tops of mountains and they were very secure. And at night, the guerrillas would come out, attack the Kuomintang, then retreat back to the base. Everything was cool. But at a certain point, the nature of warfare needed to change. And the troops needed to come out of those mountain strongholds and form mobile units that would fight in a different way. And many of the guerrilla commanders refused because they were comfortable and safe in their mountain strongholds. They didn't want to change. That's part of the problem in left and progressive circles. Too many of us are comfortable in our particular organizations with our funding sources, maybe with our brand, right? And the idea of a reconfiguration is really scary because it, among other things, means you're going to be with people you may not like, you may not know, you have to operate differently, you can't impose the same organizational culture that you might have been used to. This is scary. We're actually building a new army. And so my challenge to progressives is to get out of the mountain stronghold, because ultimately, if we don't, we'll get swamped. That's the bottom line. And so there's good work that's out there, but I'm just saying it's not enough, and it's not appreciating, to borrow from Malcolm X, we're running out of time.
Thank you so much for that response. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go back to. I'm just trying to put these together in some order, but we might be moving around a little bit. We have a question here about This is from Mark Schaefer. I'm not sure who wants to take this one. Possibly Nancy, because you talked about Fox Network, not news. That Mark writes, we're in an asymmetric struggle with the hard right, which is funded by multiple billionaires, but their policies are harmful to the vast majority. How can we build a progressive communication slash mobilization system with comparable reach to Murdoch, Sinclair et al. to reach the same kinds of millions of people daily?
Yeah, I think I would take that
Again,
question.
they're really just like, they really don't believe that they own all the media already. They think there's like neutral kind of centrist media, and then there's Fox News, which they haven't figured out yet that conservatives don't even like and watch anymore. Well, I mean, maybe they're going to figure it out today because new ratings came out today that pretty clearly say they're not watching it anymore. But like they really have no idea that the left controls all the media, and there are a couple right-leaning outlets, of which Fox News is no longer on the list at all. It's fascinating to me how little these people understand about things that they claim to have studied extensively and have literally written books about. I'm going to be honest. Anytime you guys get into these discussions, it ends up looking a whole lot like, I want to force my religion on you. I don't know how you can't see this. I really don't. Anytime you say things like this, it ends up looking like, I'm going to legislate my religion. I'm going to force my religion on you. I'm going to try to push it on you in every possible way I can. I don't know why we can't just all agree that perhaps keeping your effing religion in your home or in your community of worship is the only way to move forward in any constructive way. If you are focusing more on forcing your religion onto other people through backdoor means than you are in practicing it on your own, then you are not a godly person to begin with. You're just an authoritarian douchebag. I'm sorry. I don't give a flying fuck. I do not care. You are not listening, and you are clearly not grasping the point, because your priority seems to be forcing your religion onto other people rather than paying attention to what we're doing. And this happens every single time these discussions come up, and I am fucking tired of it. I am tired of it. Because it's your fucking religion. Teach it in your church. Teach it in your home. Why? God fucking damn it. You want to know why you assholes lose? Because of this. Do you want to know why? You will be perpetual fucking losers for the rest of your life because of this. Do you want to know why these people, these fucking morons who are so unhinged from reality that it is ridiculous, do you want to know why they're kicking your ass 19 ways from Sunday? Because of this. That is why. This is why you are losing. We do not want your religion forced on us. We will never support you forcing your religion on us. Keep it in your home. Keep it in your church. I don't know why this is so fucking hard to understand. I don't know why you are so hell-bent on losing so that you can force your fucking religion onto all of us. I don't know why you deem that more important than beating these people. My God. My effing God. I'm just going to sit here and wait until the chat collects itself and decides to stop planning on how they're going to force their religion onto other people now. Are we done yet? Apparently we're not done yet. I'm going to just sit here and be quiet, guys, until you decide when you are done discussing how we're going to force Christianity on people today. I'll sit here all fucking night. I have beer, I have knitting, I don't really care. All right, looks like we finally stopped. Excellent. Now let's continue.
From an oblique angle and say it's important to remember why they need all of this on the other side, because they know that their policies are unpopular. They know that,
hang on.
that they're not.
Got a super chat. Beth, this was not your fault. I don't blame you. Rottweiler says, okay, 10 Commandments in school, but also Haddis, you ass goblins don't understand the Establishment Clause, also protects you from that. I tend to agree with you. Mark says, Jesus attracted people to him by his example. That's what your true Christian does. I agree with that. And I don't understand why that's not good enough. I don't understand. Beth, you don't have to be silent. I don't think this was actually you that caused the downturn. I think it's Christians that are getting their fifis in a bunch. Every single time someone says, "Don't force your fucking religion on us. We don't want it." And it's like, you start by saying it nice. Start like, can we just agree that we don't believe the same thing? Nope, not good enough. Can we agree that you can go and worship however you want and do whatever you want in your own home, but just like, I just don't want to do it. Nope, not good enough. Can we agree that the Bible doesn't fucking, nope, not good. It's like, and it escalates because they never take no for a fucking answer. It is mind-boggling to me. It is mind-boggling. Jesus Christ. Naruto, off topic, I'm watching your Matt Walsh stream. Chad didn't seem to realize that Nancy Pelosi is retiring at the end of her term and they don't care. No, they don't care about that at all. Like I said, they don't know anything about Nancy Pelosi. All right. Looks like we've reined it back in. Let's return to the presentation. We have about 20 minutes left.
Not going to win people to a lot of what we need. And so I'm not sure trying to create some kind of huge media conglomerate would do it. I mean, I remember in the early days of right-wing talk radio, there was, an attempt to form a left-wing version of that, Air America. Part of the problem is, like, the likes of us, like, we have shit to do. Like, I don't want to sit and listen to somebody yelling at me all day.
Oh, look, what argument this is going to make everyone happy again. What argument did Nancy just use about why the left couldn't speak up? This is just fucking, this is like, that was one of the most beautiful things that's ever happened. Let's just rewind. What argument did Nancy just make about why the left can't speak up? Let's listen to it again.
They know that, that they're not going to win people to a lot of what we need. And so I'm not sure trying to create some kind of huge media conglomerate would do it. I mean, I remember in the early days of right-wing talk radio, there was, an attempt to form a left-wing version of that, Air America. Part of the problem is, like, the likes of us, like, we have shit to do. Like,
we have jobs! She literally just said that the left can't do what the right does because they have jobs. Oh, God. See, now we can move on from forcing our religion in schools, because that shit was legitimately hilarious.
Like, I don't want to sit and listen to somebody yelling at me all day, right? Like, I know what the problems are. Like, there was a tribal thing going on the right that the
Exactly.
left doesn't seem to want in the same way. And partly because, people who are not on the far right sample a whole range of media. So my personal
What?
feeling is that
Wait,
that's
what?
not
What? People on the right sample a whole range of media? Are you off your nut? God, I want to reach out to this woman and get her on my channel. I would have to be so slick about it. Be like, Nancy, I want to ask you I read your amazing book about right-wing extremism, and I have some questions. Do you actually believe that the right consumes a variety of media? Do you believe that the right controls the media? Do you believe that the left has no control over the media at all? Do you believe that the reason that the left can't establish a stronghold in the media is because you guys have jobs? It would be like the greatest interview in the history of my channel.
so much the need now. I mean, I think we
Beth,
could
you're
work.
an exception to the rule.
What we do need is a huge program of popular education, of listening to communities, but also bringing knowledge about the scale of the threat that we're facing, about different ways to fight it, about groups that are involved in that struggle. And so I would approach this in a different way, and in keeping with what Bill was saying, which I 100% agree with, that, I think the purity politics on the left, quite frankly, as a historian, I think it's the unacknowledged debt to Puritan America, right? And there's a way that Protestantism has been secularized, and so many on the left want to prove their bona fides. I am more righteous than you because I will say all of these nouns and adjectives in a sentence that may not play anywhere else in the country, but you will know that I am righteous, right? And that's going to kill us. It's totally going to kill us because we are living in a geographically based political system, for one thing, a federalist system where the left is concentrated in very few places, and if we aren't getting out to those red states and challenging what's going on there, we're not going to make it. So rather than think about trying to construct a whole new media system, I would say the more immediate task is to find people where they are. As Bill was saying, what Bill said reminded me of a great piece by Bernice Johnson Reagan, who was part of the Albany Freedom Movement and then Sweet Honey in the Rock, the a cappella group. But she wrote this great piece about coalition building back in the 1980s. But she said, stretch your perimeter. If you're not feeling the strain, you're not doing the work. Right. So if everybody, on this call would think of all the networks that they're connected to, whether it's personal or the church or school or, community center or places that you could make a relationship with, and start trying to engage people in these kinds of conversations and public education, that would go a long way, right? And knitting, the bridges that need to be built locally and at the state level with different groups around the kind of agenda that Bill is talking about. I think that's much more the need, because there are, I think a majority of people agrees with us. I mean, we saw that in the huge turnout in 2020 and and people, it was an anti-fascist vote, really, that Biden was the beneficiary of. But nobody's telling those people what to do. Every day, each one of us gets up to hundreds of, fucking fundraising emails. Not a single one says, what can you do? What should you do? Where should you be? How can you help? Right. So I think that's what needs to be doing. As Bill said,
point for the right to listen to as well.
There should be a very calm, deliberate presence that will speak well to those watching, but we should outnumber them everywhere and use a kind of jujitsu. They want to be bullies. Well, we're going to show the public just what bullies they are by being present with cameras, as has happened with police murders of African Americans. I mean, having that footage, if you think of the case of George Floyd, it's transformative. So I would argue for more kind of grassroots media and outreach and public education.
Amy, can I just add something?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I love what Nancy was just saying. See, we the oppressed never have more resources than the oppressor. Never in history. I mean, just think about it, right? And so the reality is that we're fighting an asymmetric struggle. And the difficulty for many people is that they see something like Fox and they say, well, we want our own Fox. Well, we're not going to get it. Or this billionaire that gave $1 billion to the Federalist Society. I mean, I wish that there was a progressive capitalist out there that would give us $1 billion. That's not going to happen. Nor is there an invisible socialist country in the Atlantic that's going to ship us gold. It ain't going to happen. So that means that we have to think very differently than our opponents. There are lessons that we can learn, and I really think very important lessons from the beginning, early years of the new right in the late 60s, early 70s. But we're going to be operating in a very different way. We do not have the institutions that they do. But that doesn't mean we can't win and we can't defeat them tactically either. But we have to think in a different way. So that begins with this question of vision and organization.
Can I also hop in real quick? I
Yes,
want to
man-bun, you
piggyback off the
can.
idea of getting past the purity test, and I think that's really important here. And the way that I think we could do that.
I think it's interesting that in the past couple weeks, we've watched more than one presentation where leftists are talking about the fact that you need to get beyond this purity test. Because we watched it on Midwestern Marks. Midwestern Marks was overtly talking about how they needed to go outside of like their gatekeeping tendencies to recruit new people to their movement. And now Man Bun here is basically saying the same thing, like we cannot rely on a purity test. I think that's interesting. Whereas I look at the right, and the right are like, we don't want libertarians. We don't want leftists. We don't want, like they actively kick out people who left the left. They actively kick out libertarians. They say, like, we don't want your votes. We don't care. GTFO out of our movement. The right is like hunkering down on their gatekeeping and their purity tests and blatantly telling people not to vote for them, which is why they didn't do so well in the midterms last year. Whereas the left is like, you know what? Maybe we need to get rid of those purity tests. Maybe we need to be reaching out to people. Maybe we need to reach out to populists. I think that's really telling.
This to like build a movement, if we can't go from the top down because we don't have the resources, as Bill just noted, start from the local level. This is how the far right got their start, right? They targeted local elections where there's very little turnout. They got people on the school boards and on the local councils and then started building from there. And, what's funny is that they actually use left-wing organizing techniques. The John Birch Society was literally modeled after the old Communist Party USA. And, if we could start by targeting locally, you get a foothold and then you're able to build. And I agree with Bill and Nancy both that getting past the purity test is really important because that's how the conservatives won their elections. They were able to find a way to get the far right and the pragmatic or kind of like mainstream right, so to speak, to talk to each other. And then they started winning because they formed a coalition. Whereas the left, as of recent, has been really, in my lifetime at least, has been really good at forming, circular firing squads. And that's about it.
Thank you, everyone. This is a great discussion. I've got, on that note, I want to do a question for John and then back to Bill with another one. But to start with, for John, this is from Jonah. This is John talked a lot about groups like the Jeffersonian Democrats and the John Birch Society, as you just mentioned, perhaps analogous to today's alt-light, but less on more radical mass organizations like the Silver Shirts, Father Coughlin's Christian Front, and the Third Klan and American Nazi Party, active during the same historical eras. What do you see as the relationship between these two wings of the far right, particularly as it relates to your characterization of the far right as the vanguard of conservatism?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're collaborative. A lot of the guys like the Birchers, the Jeffersonians didn't want to encourage the violent radicals, and I would include like the Minutemen and those types of more radical and extreme groups in that category. They didn't want to be perceived as violent because they thought that would ruin their image publicly, but they didn't mind working with them. They were fine if those guys sat in on their meetings. They didn't have a problem networking with those guys. You know, I mean, the Citizens Council and the Klan, the real big difference was the violence, right? But the Citizens Council sought the same sort of ends, just through different means. You know, and it's not that they were willing to talk to Klansmen. To me, it's just a different side of the same coin. You know, and these guys did collaborate. You know, they worked together because they had the same end goal of maintaining kind of a conservative authoritarian regime in the South. And so to me, I think I think it's all part of the same network. It's just a different way of getting at what they view as a similar problem.
Thank you for that. Thanks so much. Yeah, great. I want to go back to Bill and kind of combine a couple of questions here, if that's okay. Well, we've got a question from John Woodward that says, how might the panel square Fletcher's encouragement of wider alliance building with Nancy MacLean's warning of factionalism within the military? And also combine that with this idea of Miriam Bensman asks about calling for uniting against fascism. To what extent does that mean cooperating at times with centrists and capitalists? So again, you know, who are we working with?
Do we need to cooperate with the evil centrists and capitalists?
And does that make sense?
Isn't it funny that they grouped those two things together? The centrists and the capitalists?
I just jump in on for a sec on this question of the military, because I don't see those two things as being
those evil merchants.
In the way that the
How dare they?
Poses them. I think the kind of broad alliance building that Bill was talking about will also be helpful in the military. But I think, you know, on the military question, I think we have to realize that we, you know, the leftists used to, you know, going back to Bill's point about getting out of habits that are destructive in this moment, the left, and I'm as guilty as anyone, has a history of thinking of the military as, you know, the whole thing as like enforcing an imperialist presence.
I hope they actually answer the question. She answered a different question that was not asked.
I think, you know, in the spirit of what Bill was saying about recognizing significant distinctions, you know, among capitalists and in other places,
isn't it ironic?
Do that with the military,
don't you think?
Because the right now is trying
a little
to
too ironic
the actual nonpartisan
and I really do think
military leadership committed to the Constitution, right? And that would include people like, you know, blow me away with a feather, General Mark Milley, who criticized Trump, did what he could to quietly avert the coup, and then said publicly that the military has a white supremacy problem it needs to deal with, and that's why he wants to know about CRT and DEI.
White supremacy means capitalism.
So you know, I think that is
Mark Milley is a capitalist or is a communist.
Obviously, they're committed
not
to the
a
empire and everything else, but if they're also committed to the Constitution,
exactly
in this moment,
like
that's
rain
really
on your wedding day.
And so that's what I'd say. But I think, you know, these are two different terrains, and I don't see any conflict between building broad alliances and trying to be aware of those divisions and ways in which we could perhaps be part of helping to marginalize the people who are trying to create a truly rogue military.
I want to encourage everybody to watch 7 Days in May. A brilliant movie. Rod Serling, famous for The Twilight Zone, wrote the screenplay.
I'm pretty sure.
It's about a coup attempt. And it was came out in the early 60s. And it was actually at a point when John Kennedy thought that there could be a coup against him by elements of the military.
Like when the CIA had him assassinated?
You're looking at these contradictions within an institution that many of us will never get close to. And so it's the notion for us of exploiting contradictions that becomes very, very important. A second point is we need to organize veterans. We need to be much better, and we need to support the work of those who have Veterans for Peace, even though I don't agree with them on the issue of the Russo-Ukrainian war. I think that they've done a really important job, Iraqi war veterans, et cetera. There needs to be an anti-fascist veterans formation. If you don't organize veterans, veterans will be organized by the right. It's just history just demonstrates it time and again. And so we need to have an approach that reaches out there. The third thing I want to say is in terms of the question specifically about uniting with centrists. You unite with whoever you need to unite with in order to defeat our main enemy. And so there will be
how it should work.
Have the centrist Democrats around certain things, around civil liberties and a number of other things. But there will be big differences. There will, in fact, be strategic differences. And we shouldn't cover over those. We should recognize that.
I still feel like I was so naive and so stupid to believe that the political right actually wanted to win something. God, shame on me for and I like giving people the benefit of the doubt. I really do. But hearing him say you should be uniting with anyone that you need to in order to defeat your political enemies. Yes, that actually should be what it is. People should be helping each other and supporting each other, not constantly trying to rip each other down, not constantly trying to destroy each other. And it's just I really feel God, I still have a lot of feelings around I'm going to take a point of personal privilege. I still have a lot of feelings around trying so hard to put aside things that I believed to try to find a way to work with the conservative right in a way that okay, we don't agree on everything. Fine, but can we come together and kind of align around the fact that the left is goddamn crazy and they're actually a bigger problem? And I put so much stuff aside that I believed in and that I cared about to try to do that, and it was just not reciprocated at all. I'm still really bitter about this. I still have a lot of feelings about this. And it's just too bad because it doesn't need to be that way. It doesn't need to be that way at all. We should be working together to defeat the left. And that should be the number one priority. Waking up people from the left, getting people to leave the left, trying to find ways that we can, align on issues or prioritize our own shit in a way that, you don't have to have every single argument at every point. This is why I lose my shit when Christians in the chat are but can we get the Bible in school? Because it's not separate. It's not separation of religion. It's protection. Whatever the Christians say to rationalize forcing Christianity on people. And I'm you know what? That should not be your priority. And if that is your priority, then you deserve to lose. Because no one's going to work with you that's not already on your team. And it's your own damn fault because you just couldn't set your bullshit aside to try to find a way to work together. I've never been a pro-life person. Ever. And I never will be a pro-life person. Ever. It will never, ever happen. But during 2020, when I was touring around with the Walkaway campaign, I fucking never talked about abortion. Not because I didn't care, but because it was not the time for it. It was not the place for it. There were other things that were more important. But it's I feel like the right just cannot wrap their heads around this. They feel like they have to fight every single fight at every single moment to remain as morally pure as they can possibly be. And because of that, they're going to lose. They're absolutely going to lose because no one wants to work with them. And they make it impossible. They drive everyone away. No, I absolutely did not become pro-life. Absolutely not. And if you read the piece that I wrote that I didn't become pro-life. Absolutely not. I believe that women should have a right to choose. I believe that particularly when women have been raped, they deserve the right to choose. Just because I think the left is crazy does not mean that I'm going to throw away my values. And this is what people don't understand. I'm sorry. Like, I was very clear about my views on this, Radical Moderate. I'm sorry if you didn't read the article that I wrote and you only read the headline. I'm sorry. There is a big difference between pro-life and pro-sadist. That's exactly right.
In some states, the struggle will not be principally against the far right. It will be against centrists, Democrats who might be holding power in a particular city, county, or state. But at a national level, we're building a front against the neo-Confederate forces.
I am not pro-abortion. I think abortion is sad and wrong. I'm not pro-abortion doula. I am not pro-abortion shrine. I am not pro any of these things. But my point was that there are times and places to have that conversation. And when you're trying to work together, what you need to do is to take your views on abortion and put them on the fucking shelf. Because if you insist on talking about your views on abortion, yep, you are indeed wrong. That is not what I said. That is not what I said at all, Radical Moderate. I'm sorry, but you only heard what you wanted to hear. If you can't take your views on abortion and put it on a shelf because you have to talk about abortion at every single time, then you don't really want to win. I'm sorry. There is absolutely no need to talk about it at all times. I put my views about it on a shelf for a year. And then everyone was surprised when I came out and said, like, I'm actually pro-choice. I'm not pro-life. I was like, oh my God, you're a leftist. I'm like, no, I just put aside my personal views because we had bigger problems, and stupid me, I thought that you were actually in favor of solving problems, you know? Anyway.
And we can't ever lose sight of that. Never lose sight of what the balance of forces looks like right now, because otherwise we will be going sideways. Now, one of the things about liberals that we have to keep in mind is that liberals are scared to death of the left, and that there is a propensity for liberals to believe that the institutions of bourgeois democracy will be self-correcting. And this is what they really want to believe, that the institutions will always make sure that the far right remains at the fringe.
I think we have, Liz. I think you're right.
You could see this in Italy and Germany in the 20s and 30s. You see it periodically in the United States. And we have to be the ones that always say that there is no pendulum. There is no institution that's impervious to the attack of the far right or being influenced by the far right. Case in point, the Supreme Court. But we have to understand this is who liberals are. So we shouldn't attack liberals for being liberals. We should understand who they are, what their limitations are, and where we can unite with them. Let us unite with them against a common opponent, but never losing sight that we have strategic differences.
Yeah, real briefly, I want to say, like, touching on the military stuff that you both have been talking about, I think you're both right. And we often, I think on the left, have a tendency to kind of like homogenize the military as like entirely run through with conservative actors and thinkers. But I know a lot of veterans and they're left leaning, like maybe not leftists, but they might operate as like liberals, you know, and they're mad, like, you know, the VA doesn't treat them well. They, you know, they struggle to get their benefits. And I think that's a real opportunity, is to reach out to veterans, you know, that might be kind of moderate, even liberal leaning, and try to organize them. I think that's a really key opportunity. I agree with both of y'all.
I am so sorry to say that we are out of time. I apologize if we did not get to your question.
Man, that was
but thank you all for sending in your thoughts. I just want to give one more final thank you to our amazing panelists. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I want to remind everyone that I believe that David has put some links to most recent books from our panelists in the in the chat for people to see. So please check those out to read and learn more from our wonderful guests. And I want to remind everyone that this has been recorded and will be available on NPEC's YouTube channel. So please look for that. I'm not exactly when it will be up, but it will be. And encourage you to attend further events for this kind of discussion. And again, finally, one more final thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Well, I guess that is all for this week's Socialism Saturday. That went by quick. That was much easier to listen to. This is why sometimes it's okay to do a nice, light Democratic Socialist stream, because they're much easier to listen to. They don't speak in code as much. I would really like to find out more about that woman who teaches at Duke, who wrote that book about right-wing extremism, because goddamn was she dumb. She didn't know what the hell she was talking about. That would be a fun thing to look into if I had, extra time in my day. But guys, as a reminder, next week I will be taking the day off because I will be at PorkFest all next week, and so my streaming schedule is not going to be as usual. But I am thinking about doing a Sunday special tomorrow. I might still be streaming while I'm at PorkFest, just depending on what's going on and how inebriated I am and how the Wi-Fi is doing on any given day. But if not, I will be back when I'm back, and we can all enjoy it then. But guys, thank you for hanging out for Socialism Saturday. As a reminder, if you are a member in my I'm thinking about streaming that Bible thing tomorrow. I am. Yesterday, I found a presentation that was all about trans and non-binary in the Bible. And I was like, ooh, this is a good thing to be blasphemous over. So I might be doing that tomorrow. We're going to have to see. But tomorrow we will absolutely be having movie night in the Discord. We do movie nights on Sundays at 8 p.m. And tomorrow we are watching Minority Report, which actually came out when I was in college. And I saw it twice in the theater when I was in college. And it'll be interesting to kind of like revisit it today. It's a great movie. I really feel like it's held up. We do movie nights every Sunday on my supporter Discord at 8 p.m. And if you want to get access to it, there are a bunch of different ways. Number one, you can become a member of this here YouTube channel. That will get you access to the supporter Discord. You can join my locals community, kb.locals.com. You can join my Patreon. That's pretty great. But the best way is to join my Substack, which is Carlyn, Karlyn, .substack.com. And what will happen is tomorrow, every Sunday, I send out an email that looks like this called the Unwoke Roundup. And at the bottom of the email, if you scroll past all the news and all the things that we've done so far this week, you will find access to your supporter perks, which includes the 2 weekly Zoom calls, which will be happening. I will not be there for them, I don't think, but Tori and Joshua in my community have graciously agreed to step up and to host the Zoom calls when I'm away. So there will be the private unrecorded Zoom calls. I'm sorry, I just won't be there for them, but I will be back next week. You will also get access to the supporter Discord, whatever other supporter perks might be happening that week. You can find all that in the Unwoke Roundup newsletter as a paying supporter on my Substack for $5 a month, $50 a year. And I would love it if you guys could sign up now, because there's a really big conference I want to infiltrate in like a month and a half to about a month and a half or so. Month and a half, 2 months, something like that. I can't even do calendars off the top of my head anymore. And your support will help me do that. There is a cost required because I got to get a bunch of people registered for the conference and stuff like that. It's going to be a big effing to do, but guys, I promise you it's going to be so great, but I need your help to do it. Please sign up on my Substack, $5 a month, $50 a year. It really does help me out, and it helps me to be able to show you guys what's really going on in the world. And I greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate it. All right, guys, that's all we have for right now. Take care. Have a good rest of your Saturday. When is movie night? Movie night is tomorrow at 8 p.m. Sundays at 8. All right, guys, we'll see you soon. Bye.